So it's over to the Mayor of Bruges to fire the pistol. 197 riders heading out towards the far end of the course before they turn after the sea breeze is up near Ostend and head into the mountains. They call them bergs, and there's 17 of them on the road of the Tour of Flanders. La Ronde is underway. So we're joining the action now. As you can see, the sun is high in the sky. It's a beautiful spring day in Belgium. It doesn't often happen, but it has today. And Lance Armstrong, I know, is very pleased about the weather. He said he wanted 20 degrees Celsius, and he's got it. 131 kilometers to go to the finish, and a breakaway group, the traditional breakaway, which we don't expect to survive, at the moment holding 5 minutes and 34 seconds. One of the surprised riders in the breakaway, Paul, is Magnus Bagstedt, who in 7 days' time will be defending his crown in Paris-Roubaix.
I'm a bit surprised to see Magnus Bagstedt getting himself into a breakaway situation like this, but it will take a lot of pressure off his shoulders, and of course he will get into the early climbs in a very good situation, but he won't, I don't think, have the legs to challenge down towards the end. He has said, Phil, since the start of this season that his major objective is to try and win Paris-Roubaix again.
Well, there's the sharp end of the peloton, which isn't exactly under pressure right now as riders move up the cycle path there to try and reposition at the front. The idea being that once they get to the big climbs, then there'll be a different race taking place because they want to see the front of those climbs. The first hill of the day, the Molenberg, will come in about 10 kilometers time for the leaders, and so it'll be about 12 kilometers to go for the head of the pack. I'll just give you the rundown in the breakaway. Carlos Barrido of Liberty Seguras, number 141. Number 107 is Francis Moret of the Fassa Bortolo team. The leaky gas rider is Magnus Bagstedt, winner of Paris-Roubaix. We've got Samuel Marzoli, who is also in there. He rides for Lampre Cafita. And Constantino Zabaya, who's riding extremely well this year, is in the breakaway for Sonia Duval. And the other riders to complete the leaders is David Boucher of MrBookmaker.com. And there is Lance Armstrong. Well, he's still very much in this race. He's approximately 130 kilometers from the line, and just keeping an eye on those around him. But Paul, just look how he makes so much room in the peloton to get forward.
A lot of riders, I think, a little bit scared about touching shoulders with Armstrong in case they would be the one to knock him off. But he does like these races. He does know how to ride at the front end of the main field. And talking to one or two of his teammates before the start, they said that in the last two races that he rode, the Flèche Brabazon, which is not too far away from here near Brussels, and the Paris-Camembert race, he rode a very good race, and his legs were turning over like on his big days.
A tight fit through the many Belgian towns here that we're passing through. In fact, earlier on the race came through the town of Kortrijk, and it doesn't normally go down that way, but 1 year ago to the day, Brick Scott, one of the original line of Flanders, who won this race twice, was buried, and it was fitting that the race diverted to go through Kortrijk and remember the great Brick. Neder-Zesvalm is where we are right now. The gap at 5 minutes and 38 seconds.
Well, we're about 12-15 kilometers away from the first big climb of the day, and that is the climb of the Molenberg. But I've always regarded the big start of the Tour of Flanders as being the Old Quaremont, because that is really where you have to start the climb in the first 15 or 20 places. You can see them stretching out. I think riders now, Phil, starting to take this just a little bit more seriously. This is the Achteraan peloton, the back end of the main field. And this is certainly not the place you want to be in the next 15 kilometers or so, because it will start to whip up. And if you look at the length of the main field, I think all of a sudden somebody sounded some alarm bells at the front end of the race to say, look, we're getting to the strategic point of this race. Let's try and speed up the race.
Well, there's the clock counting down. We're now 129 kilometers to go. The Molenberg, we hit that at 113 kilometers to go. And then they just keep coming thick and fast. The strong men of the race, and you can see now the peloton blocking the road here to try and stop the progress of riders from behind moving to the front. It's a simple tactic that doesn't cause the use of too much energy, because the teams just get to the front and they simply prevent anybody getting by them, because once they start the climbs, it really is every man for themselves. 5:39, so we just added a second to the breakaway, but once on the hills, then it's a case that the peloton, it's very difficult to control the teams, and so everybody will have a go. The strong will survive, and by the time they get down to Gerardsbergen and the Muur de Grammont, then we should know exactly who the strongmen are. Surveys Canavan there, Paul, in the white helmet, had a good start to the season. He's had a win already.
Yeah, he's a great bike rider. He likes these races. Tom Boonen also over to the right-hand side, not very far off. That's Gianluca Bortolami right in the middle there for Team Lampley, a former winner of this race. And it was interesting to see that Armstrong was riding right in the second row there behind his teammate Max van Heesewijk. I would expect van Heesewijk to sacrifice himself a little bit here this afternoon because he's had a little bit of a bronchial infection over the last couple of weeks and he's not really got over it. There's van Heesewijk just at the front of the peloton, but right behind him Lance Armstrong.
You see the face of van Heesewijk. He's the first rider in blue there. They're just trying to keep the pace high. There's a veritable charge now to get up to the hills and make sure you've got your man who matters at the head of that bunch, because once we start the climbs, riders will slip their gears, riders will fall off. A delay can mean the end of the race. Anyway, we're back up with the leaders now. There are 6 of them. Berido, Murray, Backstead, Marzoli, Zabaya and Boucher are the men who've made the early move of the day. As Paul Sherwin likes to call it, the early morning breakaway that normally doesn't succeed, but somebody's got to do it.
Somebody has to do it. It did succeed a few years ago, and the man who won it on that occasion was the man you mentioned earlier, Jackie Durand of France. He took off in the early morning breakaway, and they were never seen again. But with 5.5 minutes advantage and 128 kilometers to go, I don't really think these men will survive. Even Magnus Backstead, the big strong winner of Paris-Roubaix last year, I think won't have the force left in his legs once we start to accelerate on these climbs. And a breakaway like this, once the main field starts to get to the small climbs, this group can lose itself a minute on every one of those climbs quite easily.
Well, I'm sure that Backstead, who has got himself into this breakaway, is on the front at the moment, is now deciding to test his legs.
He's testing his legs, I should think, just the week before Paris-Roubaix. We're on a very long section of cobblestones here, the Cassean section, the 2.4 kilometers of the Padestrata. These cobblestones have been relaid over the last couple of years, and they really are rather good and a lot more comfortable to ride on than they were a few years ago. But Backstead trying himself out over the cobblestone sections here, thinking about what's coming up in just 7 days' time. His defense of the Queen of the Classics, Hell of the North at Paris-Roubaix. Moving across there to the left-hand side of the road. A lot of riders will do this. It's a fairly precarious thing to do. There's very often a small piece of tarmac to the left-hand side, and although it's easier to ride on, as you can see, it is quite dangerous because all of a sudden it disappears and you're right in the middle of the field. So, just moving over to the right-hand side, you can see Backstead, Phil, here, not asking anybody for help at all, just sitting on the front there, quite happy to dictate the pace, and just look at the crowd. This is the nicest day I think we've had over the Tour of Flanders over the last few years, and I think that's why we're seeing a monumental crowd.
The birds are singing, the trees are popping, the Tour of Flanders is entertaining possibly 500,000 spectators, probably more around the course today. You can never count them because they're always changing position as the race zigzags its way around Flanders. And this is the breakaway who's seeing the first stretch of cobblestones here with a lead of 5.5 minutes. I'm absolutely convinced now that Magnus Backstead has decided to give it a good go, see how his legs are, and probably retire from this race before the end to leave himself in good form for next week's Paris-Roubaix, the one he really wants. Amazingly, Paul, that was his only win last year, was the big Queen of the Classics.
It doesn't matter really, does it? If you've got that win under your belt, that's something you can retire on for the rest of your season. It's sitting at the back here is Sami Marzoli for Team Lamprey. I think he's starting to feel just a little bit more difficult sitting on the back end of the group, and you can see the rider just in front of him there. This is why it is most important to ride at the front on the cobblestones, because you have to respond to the maneuvers of the other riders, and you can just see there Maggie Backstead at the front. He's not asking for any help, not taking any prisoners at all, just sitting there tapping out the pacemaking, while the guys at the back, they're really under pressure, Phil, and I think that's Constantino Zabaya just at the back there from Saunier Duval. A very good sprinter.
He's having real problems with the cobblestones. You can tell he's a Spanish rider, Paul. They really don't like these Belgian races, which are, you've just got to grovel in that gutter and hang on. And in fact, Marzoli here simply cannot control his bike and pedal quick enough. He's being tailed off.
He's being tailed off, and it's all because of the pressure on the front end of the group by that man, Magnus Backstead. Now the front end of the main field has changed colours. It's turned to a slightly pink shade, and that is because Team Mobile have come to the front here, and that is to look after Stefan Weserman, who looked very confident at the start of the day. And in fact, you can see them just getting themselves organised. The back end of the main field.
Now a little bit of a problem here, and this is an important move because this is Andrus Oge from Fassa Bortolo. I think he's got a flat tyre. That's not the place to get one. Back wheel's gone. Very unlucky. Puts him out of position now for when they start the climb on the Molenberg. And you can see the strong teams are getting their leaders up to the front now. This is a veritable charge to start the climbs. Many of you will have ridden in Belgium, and if you haven't, then you should know that the riders on these narrow roads, they start steadily, but when they can smell the hills, they really turn down the throttle because they want to get to that gap first. And by and large, they nearly always are preceded by a nasty corner.
By a nasty corner, and very often a nasty crash as well. But you can see the effect that this acceleration has had on the gap. It crept up to about 5 3/4 minutes, and now that the main field has turned on the gas, it's very quickly come down by 30 seconds, and that's because of the pressure being led there by T-Mobile. And actually, this is a much safer way to actually approach the hardships of a race like this, because once you strengthen it out and pull the peloton out into a long line, it, believe me, makes it a lot safer in the peloton.
You've got to stay at the front there at Rob Horst now, over 300 metres rather at Cassian, which are cobblestones in Flemish. The gap coming down all the time. T-Mobile are getting themselves very strong on the front of this group here now and really stretching that peloton out. When you go to the S's like this, it hurts the riders on the back as well. And this is the time to feel sorry now for poor old Oge, who's just punctured, because it will be a terrifically hard ride to get back onto the tail of the bunch. And that's not where he wants to be anyway if he's going to be in at the reckoning now. You've got to be top 50 riders just now.
Well, I'll tell you what, you might want to be top 25 riders, because the speed these riders are charging in here, they're going to really hit the Paderstraat very hard. That's the next section of cobblestones, and then after that they'll be setting themselves up around about 10 kilometers after the end of the Paderstraat with the first climb of the day, the Molenberg. But you can see T-Mobile have come here with a vengeance. They want to try and sort this race out, maybe announcing their colours just a little bit too early as they charge here onto the Casea of 2.4 kilometers in length.
It's a long way.
Paderstraat. It is a long way. That's going to take them around about 3.5 minutes, and it's going to be a long 3.5 minutes.
And you often think, you know, because it's nice and dry, then it's not so hard. But believe me, it is every bit as hard, because if you haven't got mud, you have dust, and it flies up into your eyes. And Erik Zabel getting himself into the reckoning here, riding. Stefan Westerman is there as well, the winner from last year. Clearly, this team come with the decisive idea of splitting this race as soon as it gets into the difficult sectors.
Just looking at these riders on the front, you can actually see the difference in speed. Look how smooth Erik Zabel is to Constantino Zabala just a few moments ago, just flicking his bike left and right, looking for the nice, comfortable place to ride. One or two riders from Mr. Bookmaker moving up there. That might be Jeremy Hunt, because I saw him riding very close to the front end of the main field. But the Paderstraat here is not going to be decisive. The important thing, though, Phil, is to make sure that you're at the front end of the peloton, because it's so dangerous in the last 15 or 20 places.
Well, this is early days, really, for this race to be decisive, but the T-Mobile squad are smarting under the fact they're making the worst start to the year for probably 10 years. They haven't won a race yet, and somebody else has got problems there, and I can't quite see who it is, but he's gone, as the field itself now is beginning to split up. In England, we have a famous horse race called the Grand National, which goes over very high fences. It is a cruel event for the horses, I always think, but it's a very exciting event to watch. And this is about the closest you will get to the Grand National. Imagine each one of the climbs as a fence, because riders fall, riders puncture, and the race continually changes formation at the front.
Becoming one of the old men of the sport on the front there, Rolf Aldag, a serious man to look after T-Mobile's interests. You see the little hand signals there. This is indicating to the riders behind, just watch out, I'm going to jump off the smoother part of the road into the center of the cobblestones. Erik Zabel just lifting himself up nice and comfortably there. This is Stefan Schreck sitting in second position. He will be one of the team domestiques for T-Mobile today. The important thing, I think T-Mobile here, Phil, are actually riding a little bit too hard too early on, because the important thing about a race like the Tour of Flanders is to have strength in numbers down towards the end of the race. If you become isolated, it's always very difficult to respond to all the attacks.
Well, Aldag is a superb bike rider. He's 36, almost 37 years of age, Aldag now. Hasn't won a race this year, of course, but he did get a couple of wins last year, and he was the king of the mountains in last year's Tirreno Adriatico, which is a bit of a surprise because he's not a very good climber. But we're looking now at the rear of the peloton here as riders now scrap for action to try and get through. Looking at number 221, Ludovic Capel, former champion of Belgium. He won't enjoy this right now. He's a sprinter. And as he's doing battle with another Saunier Duval rider, that's Ivan Ravaioli. The rider up front, by the way, Constantino Zabaya, he was third in Paris-Nice the other week, but he's a stage race man and a very good one at that. But he won't be happy, and I don't think he'll stay in that front group much longer. And talking of the front group, this is the back group here, and this is Ravaioli, who's about to meet his destiny, I think, here, having the same difficulty in exactly the same place as 5 minutes ago was his teammate Zabaya.
And the reason is because these riders are taking risks to try and ride in what's a slightly smoother surface. And the problem with that is you tend to relax a fraction, then all of a sudden there's a gap in that smooth piece of road and you find yourself flattening two tyres. Just going through the town here of Velzeke Rudehove, and you can see that that section of cobblestones there really has straightened out the front end of the main field. This is Jans Koorts on the front. A couple of years ago he had a very nasty crash here in the Tour of Flanders, but I think today he's thinking more about the possibility of a good ride by his leader Stuart O'Grady. This is Angel Gomez at the back, and I think because of the speed here he's going to have a long time before he gets a wheel change from his team car.
You see, these are impact punctures because of the way they're bouncing the bikes on the cobblestones. They are getting what they call a snake bite at the back of the tyre. It's not something going through the front of the tyre, and these two little puncture marks appear when the rim snaps on the tyre and pushes it against the cobblestones. And unfortunately, a puncture at this stage of the race usually means the end of the race. They'll chase for half an hour, find they can't catch up, and take the shortcut to the changing rooms. That's if they can find it, of course. Jans Koorts on the front, and just hovering on the 5 minute mark. The breakaway certainly not surrendering just now. They did close in quite quickly, and then they seem to have, the cobblestones has disrupted the chase here. And it looks as though T-Mobile are still driving at the front, but they are allowing others to come through. Here they are, the boys in pink. Zabel having a full conversation there with his team manager back at the race. He's continuing on his little race radio. Jans Koorts has dropped back a little bit, joined Cofidis this year. And Luca Bortolami over to the right. He always rides well in Belgium. He's got an affinity with this nation, which is very unusual for an Italian cyclist.
It certainly is, but one or two Italian cyclists over the past have become specialists in the cobblestone events. And another rider here having an incident at the back end of the main field, and that really is rather a surprise because that is Mikel Albacini, who's going to have a hard time trying to get back into the main field. I wonder today, Phil, about Eric Zabel, because he's said and admitted in the press that he hasn't quite got the punchy speed at the end of the races, but he's a powerful rider and he's finished up here in the Tour of Flanders on a number of occasions. There's another incident at the back here, two riders here from Bouygues Telecom. That's Johan Jean, and it looks as if that may well have been
Geslin,
yeah, who's got a problem too.
Geslin being the more accomplished of the two. He got the privilege of swapping wheels with his teammate, but it hasn't helped much. Looks as though he's going to have to try and get this away in top gear. The old legs are aching for him there, I think.
Bit of chaos there with the team car actually stopping past the incident, so the mechanic would have to run back to change the wheel for the rider who gave up his chances there, and that was Johan Jean. He was probably under orders at a moment like that to pass the wheel over. At certain points, especially coming out of the cobblestones, the team cars can be between a minute and 2 minutes behind. So if one of the leaders has an incident, normally you'll find a teammate will actually swap across and hand the bike in.
And because of the order of the team cars behind the race today is actually the order in the World Cup standings, and with half of the World Cup leaders not starting the race, that's caused one or two of the team managers to actually feel very abused because teams like Lotto driving number 17th position, and where your cars are on a race like this of this nature, when roads will shortly narrow down to the width of a car, it can mean the difference between servicing your rider and him losing the Tour de Flanders. So the Pro Tour, I think we can praise it by saying it's got off to a rather shaky start in its first year.
Well, one of the men complaining a lot before the start was Henrik Redant, but he was one of the big supporters of the Pro Tour. But now I think he's seeing that there are one or two negative things to the rules and regulations. Teething problems, I hope. And this is a competition which has been locked in for a number of years, so there's going to be a certain number of rule changes I would expect over the next couple of seasons if they want to fine-tune this and keep it in place.
Well, we'll know soon. Meanwhile, back with the leaders, Zabaya, third in Paris-Nice, has survived the battle of the cobblestones and has hooked up again, but there are now only 5 of them, so it looks as though we've lost the one rider off the back. Marzoli has gone, I think. Although they're saying all of the riders are still there. Oh, there are 6. Sorry, there are 6. Yeah, so they've all regrouped after the climb. And they've pushed the lead back out to 5 minutes and 3 seconds at 119 to go. So down the long straight, we'll shortly be heading on to the Molenberg, the first of 17 climbs.
6 kilometers to go to the Molenberg. Well, in fact, they're telling us it's 3. It's 113 kilometers to go from the top of the climb. And these riders will be quite happy, I think, that they'll get the right-hand turn in the first 6 places. But you will see the main field accelerate quite a bit to try and make sure that the leaders of the race are put into that first corner in the first 10 or 15 places, because the Molenberg is a very narrow little climb. We're looking here at Francis Mouret of the FDJ.com team. They're having a hard time, FDJ.com, although they're a member of the Pro Tour circuit. In fact, they're racing on 3 fronts at the moment, and I would say this is a fairly weak team that they brought here to the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Maggie Backstead, the winner last year of Paris-Roubaix. He's probably enjoying the sunshine here this afternoon as we look at Carlos Barredo. And Barredo actually was a pretty good rider last year. Got himself a win in the Tour of the Mining Valleys in the northwest of Spain, or more likely it's known as the Vuelta a Asturias.
For second-year pro, so that's the time he might want to show his true colours as he rides for Liberty Seguros, a team which is having a great start to the year, finishing first and second in the Tour Down Under. And just a little glance there at Marzoli, who I think he's just glad to be here right now. He looks a little bit tired after his breakaway.
These guys are going to get quite shell-shocked in a moment, because once they hit that first climb of the day, the first serious climb of the day, the Molenberg, they've got to climb every 5 to 10 kilometers, followed up very quickly by the Wolvenberg. But to me, 20 kilometers after that, they've got the Old Quaremont, which really is an unbelievable climb, a climb that actually, as a non-climber, I used to enjoy, because the most important thing is getting yourself in a good position. If you can hit the Old Quaremont in the top 15 or 20 places, actually everybody ends up just riding at the same speed and nobody can really accelerate on it.
That's right. You don't settle down to a big mountain session. A strong man and good tactical sense, and you'll get over the top of them. Francis Mouret, rather, of Française des Jeux. He got a win last year in his first year as a pro, just like Barredo. And now time for him to settle in as well. He's only 24 years of age. And sat here at the back is Marzoli. I think of all the people now, Marzoli is the one suffering quite badly. He hasn't yet recovered by his chase to rejoin after the cobble sections, and he's about to get hit by the Molenberg, and I think that'll be the end of him. There's the peloton rethinking their strategy. Chance to move up for the boys at the back if you've got the legs and can find the space through the traffic. While at the front, that's trying to remain under the control of just 1 or 2 teams, it looks like, from the helicopter.
I think just taking a slight breather before they go to the Molenberg. All of these guys, though, will really start to take it seriously when we get that little bit closer to the Old Quaremont. But we saw an indication of who was serious about this race over the Pas de Straat a few moments ago, and it's obvious that T-Mobile are taking this event very seriously indeed, with the possibility of either Andreas Clear or Eric Zabel possibly getting the win, and of course defending champion Stefan Weissermann. There's a champion down there, number 65, Roger Hammond. Rode a very good Paris-Roubaix last year, but he seemed a little bit nervous before the start when I spoke to him, Phil, because he knows the responsibilities are so much greater now that he's on a top team like Discovery Channel.
And today he's actually riding with Lance, which I think is the first time this year, isn't it?
Yes, that's what he told me. It's the first time he's actually ridden in the same team as Lance Armstrong, and he said that the motivation was completely different in the team once Lance turned up, and once they got into the team bus on the way to the start here this morning, they knew that it was going to be a special day. The boss doesn't come to play, does he?
No, he doesn't. And he demands respect, of course. He's a presence in the peloton, not just for his team, but for all of the rides. It adds that little extra zip. He got a huge cheer in the square before the start of this race. He sat up near the front there, about 5th man down at the moment. So he's, 61 is his number. There he is. And he knows exactly how to ride a bike race. But, everybody now is speculating if on April 18th he's about to announce he intends to retire from the sport earlier than we expected. We don't know. We're not party to his mind. He's keeping it a secret, very tightly so. But that's the speculation. He's going to say after the Tour de France, it's finished.
The funny thing is about Armstrong, he, I think at the moment, feels a lot of pressure from having to come to races like this. And when he comes to a race like this, everybody is trying to figure out, this is the Molenberg turn here. This is the right-hand turn to the start of the Molenberg. 6 leaders round there nice and safely, while there's a problem at the back here from one of the riders from Rabobank. It was Frans Maassen in the team car, and he's talking here to Mark Wouters, so that's not the moment to have a mechanical incident.
Well, he's 4 minutes and 52 seconds from hitting the climb. He's at the wrong end of the peloton. Here's the stretcher cobbles. Immediately Marzoli is in trouble here. He's staying in a much higher gear than the other boys in the hope he can drive to the summit. These are nasty, sharp climbs, and the Molenberg is an hors d'oeuvre now for the 16 to follow. They're not all cobbled, but they're all pretty steep. And the Belgians packing the climbs as we expected in their thousands, enjoying a beautiful warm day, and they will shout for anybody right now.
Looks like the sport's losing a bit of its popularity today, isn't it? Unbelievable.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
The crowds here at the Tour of Flanders are always magnificent, but I think today it's exaggerated just a little bit more by the fact that the weather is unbelievable. Tickling the 20 degrees Celsius. I think everybody's decided to come out and witness this great race, because this is not just a bicycle race here in Belgium. This is a monument to their sport. And as one of the Belgian riders said to me before the start, this to a Belgian is like winning the World Championships, and that's why they are so incredibly motivated for the event. As we get closer to the strategic point, you see the time gap now starting to come down nice and sensibly, 4:45. I would think in about 25 to 30 kilometers time, those 6 riders are going to be caught.
Oh, that's a good gamble, Paul. Well, hats off to Samuel Marzoli, because he hung on there and has gone over the top with the rest of the breakaway, which are, if you're just joining us, Carlos Berrido, Francis Mouret, 2 young professionals in their 2nd season, an old hand in Magnus Bagstedt, winner of last year's Paris-Roubaix, Samuel Marzoli, who's playing yo-yo by himself at the back, Constantino Zabaya, who is 3rd in this year's Paris-Nice, and David Boucher. That's the breakaway. The gap you can see is 4:39, coming down, but nice and slowly at the minute, 115 kilometers to go, as the leaders are over the top of the Molenberg now, and they can settle in and line up for the Wolvenberg, which is their next obstacle, which is 10 kilometers up the road.
Well, the Wolvenberg is not that difficult. It's a tarmac climb, smooth surface, but these guys are coming up to the Molenberg. You can see the nervousness starting to come into the main field. That was Jans Koorts on the front there for the Cofidis team of France, and he's obviously trying to keep it nice and fast for Stuart O'Grady. O'Grady's the kind of rider who has always enjoyed races like the Tour of Flanders and, of course, Paris-Roubaix. And he, too, like many of riders of the English-speaking countries, have always wanted to excel in these very well-known one-day classics.
Well, this is the nervous part of the race. It's a long time ago since I raced in Belgium, but the speed, because they know they've got that sharp right-hand turn, which reduces from a highway to a country lane of cobblestones, and the boys who don't get through in the first 25-30 will have to virtually come to a standstill and accelerate from base right up the cobbles, and that wastes a lot of energy. This is Servais Knaven now, who's a great bike rider, and is that Tom Bonen tucked in behind him? It is. The champion-elect, as far as Belgium is concerned, is making sure he's going to see the Molenberg first.
He certainly wants to do that. He wants to keep out of any kind of danger, especially on this approach. Jans Koorts looking over his shoulder there. He wanted to see the position of Stuart O'Grady. This is a very nervous moment for these riders, because although this is not the most important climb of the day, there is very often a crash at the back end of the group, and riders have to chase for 15 or 20 kilometers to get back into the race. And the important thing, one of the great things about the Tour of Flanders, is to make sure that you don't make any useless efforts.
Well, I just saw too the Lotto team trying to break in on the scene to get Peter van Petegem up into the right part of the action, and the riders from Discovery Channel need to be up here as well. This won't be the decisive move in the Tour de Flanders, but you can lose it here. Here we go. Swing wide, go tight. Watch the centre of the pack now as they all virtually ram up the back of each other now and queue up to start the climb. And for the riders at the back, they will come to a complete standstill, and then they will have to start the climb. Meanwhile, back at the front,
Domino Vacancy. There's Eric Zabel on the right-hand side. The Molenberg, 7% the average. It's 14% at the start of the climb. And this is what it's like at the back end of the group. This is why you have to start the race in the first 15 or 20 places. Zabel is looking very comfortable today. This is a man who has been one of my heroes over the last 10 or 12 years. A very consistent man, omnipresent throughout the season, from February right the way through till the month of October. And one thing he loves is riding his bike.
Well, I take my hat off to Domino Vacanzi, getting 2 riders round there first. Mirko Celestino is the only one that we would really expect to feature at the finish of this race, but they've done well to hold the position so near the front.
Nico Martin is up there as well, riding very close to the front for the new De Vitamon Lotto team. And you can see the chaos at the back there as these riders weave their way through this incredible tunnel of noise. It really is quite a special day for the men there. You can see Tom Boonen looking comfortable in 3rd place. A little drink taken on board there for Eric Zabel. That's Nico Martin on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
These guys are certainly not taking any risks on these early climbs, and it's good to see Eric Zabel riding like this.
Well, they go over the top just 4 minutes and 4 seconds after the 6 leaders have gone over. We're obviously staying with the main field at the moment. Meanwhile, at the back of the peloton, this looks like Jakob Piel from Denmark. It's a bit of shorter form, I would think. Maybe he's coming from the cold snows, but he's at the wrong end of the race today.
A bit surprising for him. A big change for CSC here. CSC been very dominant so far in the early part of this season in the stage races, with a win going to Bobby Julich in Paris-Nice and followed up a week or two later by his win in the Criterium International. Dominic Vacanzi at the front end of the group. Eric Zabel still in third place, looking nice and comfortable. I'm not sure, but I did spot a Discovery jersey not too far away from the front end of the group, and I wonder if that's George Hincapie, who today must be seriously thinking about the chance of getting himself the win, because he's had a good start to the season with a win in Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne, and I think that takes the responsibility off his shoulders just a fraction.
Well, I agree, and the Discovery Channel this year, in their first season of sponsorship, has a tremendous team, not just for the stage races, but for these one-day classic races. Georgia Park, they brought in the British rider Roger Hammond, who was third in Paris-Roubaix last year. They've got the very young and talented Stijn de Volder, who's just won one of Belgium's top early season stage races, the 3 days of De Panne, which runs around the northern coastline, and that not very far from riding over these roads as well. And I think that's a team that's got a lot of talent this year. But they've got to get to the front like everybody else. If you don't get into position, you're not going to be in a position to win the race. Just look at the length of that line, Paul, and the boys at the back who got stopped now having to come and bridge the gap.
Well, it will continue. It'll carry on like this. There's 20 kilometers now until they get to the Old Quaremont. Then there's a small climb between here and there, the Wolfenberg. But Jakob Piel at the back there, wearing number 41, is certainly not enjoying the back end of this race. And you can just see there that Ivan Ravaioli, who was in difficulty a little earlier, he's tagged onto the back. But even though the Molenberg is a small climb, you can actually see the gaps that it started to form in the front end of the main field. Status quo, all the big heroes for the win have actually sat back and had a look around to see who's been missed out and see what the situation is. They'll back off a little bit, and I think start to accelerate once we get to the Old Quaremont. I think they were happier the way they got into the Molenberg.
A reassessment time now to see who survived the first round of gunfire as they now head up towards the Wolvenberg. Jakob Piel just celebrated his 32nd birthday a couple of weeks ago. Here's the composition of the leaders, unchanged, still all there, all 6 of them onto another stretch of cobblestones now. And they've lost a minute of the lead in the last 23 kilometres, so that's not too bad. And they're on 3 kilometres now, Kerkgate or Churchgate, little stretch of cobblestones for them now. They look pretty good at the moment, not like Paris-Roubaix.
These are nice cobblestones, nice and smooth. They've been looked after. These are used as general roads throughout the whole of the year, whereas the roads used in Paris-Roubaix are very often just farm tracks, which are only really frequented by heavy machinery and tractors, which is why a lot of them are such dangerous roads. There you can see the gap at the back. That was just caused by the Molenberg, and that's why you want to really try and keep yourself in the first 15, 20 places to stop the fact that you have to keep chasing to catch up with the main field after these small little climbs that we have here in Flanders.
The other problem the race has now, of course, you saw all those motorbikes there. They're ordered behind the race and mustn't get in and impede the riders, but they've all had to mass together as well. It's not easy to keep out of the way of riders, I must say. Meanwhile, poor old Samuel Marzoli this time looks as though he really does dislike the cobblestones, and this might be curtains for him here, because the gap is opened as big as it's been since he's been in trouble.
See everybody looking for an easy ride.
Boucher.
It's everyone's looking for the easy ride at the side of the road there, but on a day like today, that is a very sandy side of the road because it's been quite dry in Belgium for the last couple of weeks, and there's also a certain amount of danger attached to trying to do that because you lose a lot of control at the rear end of the bike, and Boucher here is having a very difficult time staying in contact. On the other hand, the man in the lime green strip there of Liquigas, although he's not looking for the win this afternoon, I would say Magnus Backstedt is looking very comfortable for next week.
This is tryout day for Magnus. See how the body feels when he thinks it's getting a bit too long for the day. I'm sure he'll abandon the race. But he'll wait and see, first of all, how the reaction is from the main field. He's come here, I think, to just try and see where his form is ready for next Sunday. He's made no secret of the fact he's enjoyed his year as being the champion of Paris-Roubaix, and if the chance comes to repeat it, he'll take it. There he is, the big man, What does he weigh in at, Paul? About 88 kilos or something?
Tickle's 90 kilos.
Good
He's
heavens.
one of the heaviest bike riders in the event, and he's also one of the tallest bike riders in the event as well. But he's a very nice character, somebody that's very popular with all of the bike riders. And in fact, he and Roger Hammond are very good mates, and the two of them were quite surprised last year to be sprinting out for the win on the velodrome in Roubaix. And Roger Hammond reckoned he could have closed the door on Magnus Backstedt, but he didn't want to because he knew just exactly who was coming up through the inside and he'd taken the wrong line.
And the sadness was they're both great friends as well, and only one could win the race. And it would have been a superb result for Britain, because Britain to this day has never had a victory. Roger Hammond getting third, equaling the previous best by Barry Hoban many years ago. There's Big Magnus now concentrating on form for Paris-Roubaix. We're convinced of that as he now heads out over this stretch of pavé. Clearly the strong man of the group, willing to drive, keeping them away. 4:37 the gap, so they picked it up a little bit. There's been a slowing at the back after the challenge of the Molenberg.
Oh, don't worry, that slowing will just be a temporary thing, because as we get just a bit further up the road, the main field will start to get nervous for the Old Quaremont, because backed up straight after the Old Quaremont is the Paterberg, and then not too far after that is the Koppenberg, and you certainly want to get over those climbs in the top 10 or 15 places. Backstedt on the front here, Phil, is looking very comfortable. He's a rider who's been around for quite a long time. He won himself a stage in the Tour de France a couple of years ago, and you remember the yelp that he let out when he crossed over the finish line. How happy was he?
Yes, a breakaway of 6, and he got Sweden's first ever victory, and indeed their only victory, I think, in the Tour de France. We haven't had a Swedish winner since. We've had a Norwegian one, and we've had a Danish one, but not from the other nation in Scandinavia, Sweden.
So this is the Volkerhem Berg, and this is the Volkerhem cobblestone section, and very shortly these riders will be looking at the Wolvenberg, which is not too bad a climb. Backstedt just quite happy there to sit and tick along. It's just about 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles to the Wolvenberg. It's not that bad of a climb, but it will set the riders up for the next climb to come. And the climb of the Old Quaremont is quite a long way from the Wolvenberg. It's around about 15 kilometers separating the two, and the time gap actually starting to creep up again.
Just watching the crowd line here, who are standing well back off the paving edge of the road, just shows they're used to watching bike racing in Belgium, because they leave the smooth section of the pavement for the riders to use, and they're watching from the front doorsteps. Whereas in any other country, you probably see them crowding out to the edge of the cobbled streets. There's the peloton from the helicopter, and they're at 4:55. We've virtually gone back out to the time gap we had over 20 kilometers ago. So, there's been a massive crash here, and the shunt riders down the ditch on the right of the road, and delays all around here.
Max van Heeswijk at the back there. Van Heeswijk, we're not surprised to see. There's one or two riders gone right into the ditch there.
Look at this poor chap on the right, completely caked in mud, Paul. He was a Liberty Seguras rider.
Last back went down there quite hard as well, and this is Ludovic Capella in the gutter as well, the former Belgian national champion. You can see both of those Liberty Seguros riders went down very hard indeed.
Well, the only good news, in fact, these riders are Aaron Kemps, the Australian, and Paulinho, the silver medalist in the Olympic Games. He's finding life a bit tough since he's become a full professional on the European circuit. I was about to say the only good news is one of those two wasn't Alan Davis, but it was poor old Aaron Kemps, and he is developing into being a great bike rider. Yet another top Aussie mixing on the top teams.
Well, the main field here on the Kerkegat, the gateway to the church cobblestone section, a very long cobblestone section at around about 3 kilometers. We don't tend to talk too much about the cobblestones in the Tour of Flanders, but there's almost the same distance of cobblestones in this race as there are in the Great Paris-Roubaix, which comes up next week. But the difference is the cobblestones here in general are fairly smooth cobblestones, except for the ones that go uphill.
That's right, and by way of a tempter, by the way, Paris-Roubaix next week has taken out the famous Forest of Arenberg, but they've managed to find an actual hill. There's never been a single hill in Paris-Roubaix. They found a little hill which is cobbled, and that is going to prove interesting, to say the least. Meanwhile, we're with the Tour de Flanders here, the 89th edition of this event. 1 kilometre shorter than last year. It won't seem any easier, believe me, as the peloton just driving here, not in pursuit of the leaders, but to keep themselves at the head of the race and out of trouble. They expect the leaders to come back, possibly of their own volition, although it might be a bit longer than Paul predicted earlier, of about 30 kilometres.
The main field will pull them back pretty rapidly once they start to get into the area around the Old Quaremont, the Koppenberg and the Paterberg. That's Salvatore Camesso there in second place. A little bit further back, the Cofidis rider is Cedric Vasseur, former wearer of the yellow jersey in the Tour de France and winner of a very long breakaway stage. And I think everyone taking a bit of a back seat now. They're quite happy. They saw how dramatically, Phil, that gap came down once they turned up the gas, and I think they've got the feeling that they can pull that breakaway group back any time that they want to. But of course, they'll leave them out to fry for quite a long time on a nice day like this.
16 climbs still to go. We've only had the Molenberg so far. 105 kilometers left to ride on what is a beautiful spring day here in Belgium. Kop van de Wedstrijd means the head of the race, and here they are. 5 of them now. It looks as though Marzoli didn't get back as we start the climb of the Wolvenberg. 17% at the bottom. It'll hurt all the way up. 4:41 as they begin the climb. And another massive crowd, and it can't be the same crowd who was standing on the Molenberg. They could not have got round here this quick.
No, they can't. There are some experts at getting around the Tour of Flanders, and one man claims the record of being able to see the event on 17 separate occasions. But I don't think he probably stuck to the traffic rules and regulations on that occasion.
It would not be for the nervous to start rushing around. You'd be stressed all day to try and keep up with the Tour de Flanders. There was a randonnée on this course, like they have in the Etape de Tour de France these days. There was hundreds of cyclists out. We spoke to some of them who were aching this morning. Even some of the journalists here were riding, and they were complaining of being a bit stiff at the start. And they said that some of the climbs were impossible to ride because there was no room to ride on them. Everybody ahead was walking.
Around about 12,000 people took part in that event. I was going to do it myself, though, but I left my bike at home.
Please, this is a serious commentary, Paul.
Well, I think I tried this on the bike a number of times many years ago, and strangely enough, this is one of the few classics that I actually never finished, and that was because of team responsibilities. We had a man on the team by the name of Jean-Luc Vandenbroek, and we had to look after him in the first part of the race. Up back at the rear end of the main field. That's certainly not something you want to try. That's Aurélien Clerc, Swiss rider on the Phonak team, who's gone down there quite hard.
It is, and he's wearing the one as the team leader today, although I think Robbie Hunter will expect a result by the end if he can hang on. Banged his elbow there. Somebody put that fence in a rather inconvenient place. They may as well have not bothered because the riders simply went around it. There's the crash there. Nasty bounce, and he's obviously just hit the shoulder of the corner of the pavement.
Actually, that was a Lamprey rider went down first, and you see it's a very dangerous thing, this event. You've got to stay at the front end of the main field, basically from now right the way through to the finish, because you never know what danger is hiding around a corner. Let's see if we can spot that again. Yes,
you see, it was the well, there's the fallen rider.
Crashes.
2 separate crashes, one at the front and one at the back. Aurélien Clerc, who is a very, very good young rider indeed. But today, I think that's going to be curtains for him here in the Tour of Flanders.
Well, he went down hard, and he will not enjoy that at all. Eric Zabel up at the front end of the main field. Just looking down, you can start to see that the numbers in this event are starting to wane a fraction, and there is obviously quite a big split on there because there were no team cars at the back end of this group as we now continue on the Wolvenberg cobblestones. And next up for these riders will be the climb of the Wolvenberg, but this is a nasty section of cobbles. It's nice to see that the Il Baleares team of Spain are certainly very comfortable in road conditions like this because they're right at the front end of the main field.
Getting their first views of what's coming at them. 4:32 the gap as the reaction again has started to race for the narrow roads of the climbs. So the gap has come down. 103 kilometers to go now. The leaders are over the top. 5 of them still together. Big drink there for Ralph Aldag, taking advantage of it. I don't think that is it is. That's Aurélien. No, it's not. No, I thought it was Clerc had got back on there, but it was his teammate, and it is Robbie Hunter there. Robbie's got a problem now. Was he involved in that crash? I wonder. That's a sad place to see the South African rider. He's having a great start to the year. I think 3 out of the last 4 years he's been voted South Africa's Cyclist of the Year. And now he's looking for service at a crucial moment of the race here.
Nico Martin just over to the right-hand side with the red shoulders there. He rides for Davitamon Lotto. He's been very attentive at the front end of the peloton. He wants to make sure that he doesn't get involved in any of those instances. On the front is Rolf Aldag, very comfortably setting the work as the team domestique here for this afternoon. And they've got 3 men who've got a very good chance of finishing off in the top 10 T-Mobile. I would have to say, of course, Stefan Westerman feels confident winning this race last year. Andreas Clear seems to be on his way back up to the top of the sport.
He does.
And, of course, the old man of the sport and the old man of T-Mobile, Eric Zabel, he loves races like this. And the important thing about an event like this, Phil, is you have to have the experience and the motivation to want to do well.
And I don't think Eric's ever lost that motivation throughout a long career. He stays so enthusiastic. He simply loves his cycle racing. And we love him winning because he's such a popular guy. And it will be a great result today. T-Mobile smarting, no victories this year yet. And they won't be happy with that because they've dominated this part of the season in the past. And, of course, won this race last year with Vesserman. Vesserman looking good and wearing #1 today.
This looks as if it could be Alexander Usov on the front end there for AG2R, a very strong bike rider. AG2R, not a team in the Pro Tour, but very often getting into these events as the wildcard selectors. With the signs on the road there, Go Lance. A lot of spectators have made the journey here to come and see this event. And riding on the front end of the group, AG2R are trying to see if they can get themselves selection into wildcards in a number of different events. Looking back there, Sonia Duval are in second place, and it looks a little bit like the shape of Andrea Taffy. Now that would be a surprise because I think he's going to retire at the end of next week, isn't he?
Well, he's always retiring.
He promised to, anyway. He had promised.
The day he retires, he won't appear because that's our only guidance with Andrea. He's another good guy who we've seen race all around the world and win in most places in the world too. Anyway, here we are up at the back with the back of the field here. This is not the leading group at the moment. This is still in trouble. Two riders perhaps just getting off the front of the peloton. 4:18 the gap. They're nearest in the peloton. Just checking on progress here. This is Taffy, as Paul has just told us. And the other one is Vaitkus. Good track rider, in fact, Vaitkus, number 108.
Yeah, national champion of Lithuania. And also, yes, he's a very good sprinter who rode the Olympic Games last year for Lithuania. And he's moved off the front end of the group with Andrea Taffy. The amazing thing about Andrea Taffy is he's been able to motivate himself over the last 10 or 12 years for this week of cycling. The Tour of Flanders, backed up by the Paris-Roubaix race, a race which he would love to try and win again if he can. It is such a difficult thing to do, and I do believe that this year he will retire after the end of Paris-Roubaix. Looking back there, they've got themselves a serious gap. But it's actually quite a long ride now from the top of the Wolvenberg all the way down to the Old Quaremont. It's around about a gap of 20 kilometers, and that gives the main field chance to get themselves organized before they start to turn up the screws with around about 5 kilometers to go to that climb.
Well, at the end of the day, they haven't really pulled them back yet. They've only pulled back 8 seconds since the Molenberg. We've yo-yoed a lot, but there we are. These two boys won't be chased down. They've taken the moment to escape. Here's life at the back here, unfortunately, for Robbie.
Looks like he's got a problem. He's looking over his shoulder. I think he's waiting for the team car to come forward. And just looking down, I can't see. Yeah, the problem there with his gears. Look at that. You see the derailleur has locked up, and I think what has happened on the cobblestones is the chain has jumped off, and it's actually got caught, and he can't get it back up. So that's going to require a bike change.
And he can't pedal. He can't do anything. He's got to ride along, frustrated as he will be now. And you don't need that sort of luck because Robbie today could have been in the selection. He's got good form. But when you have luck like that, then you finish the day off for training, I think, because Robbie's also going to be in a strong position to look at a possible high finish in Paris-Roubaix next week. And that may be what he'll have to concentrate on now.
Another rider coming across to Andrea Taffy and Vaitkus there. Difficult to see from this altitude, but actually there's a lot more riders making the contact.
I think it might be the peloton, don't count.
Looks like Aldag, and it is the front end of the main field pulling everybody back together. These riders, I think, now will not let any small groups get off the front, because they want to have a pretty good sort out once we get to the slopes of the Old Quaremont, which is now around about 18 kilometers from here.
Now again, reassessment to see who's happened along. This looks like we might have Armstrong off far left of our picture there. You see, Lance Armstrong is such a brilliant race reader. He's got this massive strength capacity to put himself in the right place. He'll be more concerned as to the whereabouts of Hincapie and perhaps De Volder, but he himself is leading like a leader should.
Well, he is. Whenever he comes to the race, he comes to participate in the actual racing, not just to get race miles in. He's not that kind of rider since he came back from cancer in 1999 to win the Tour de France. Whenever he comes, he wants to be competitive. I have a feeling that maybe his abandon in Paris-Nice was not totally due to illness, but by the fact that the weather was absolutely abominable. And the fact is, a lot of the stages were shortened to 40 or 50 kilometers. So he probably said, this is no good for me. I'll go home, train in the good weather, and come back with some form. And he showed in Flèche Brabazon and, of course, in Paris Camembert that the legs are there.
Yeah, and Lance makes no secret of the fact he doesn't particularly like the bad weather. He prefers the lovely sunshine. He's used to that from Texas. First words he said this morning was, "I've asked for the great weather and it's come."
But it's funny, he says he doesn't like the bad weather, but some of his greatest performances have been in dark and dismal conditions.
The time trial in Nantes 2 years ago.
Absolutely, and of course the first World Championships he got back in 1993.
Yep.
And that was
torrential rain. That was
unbelievably bad day. He's a tough man, and I think basically once he's motivated for something, he excels in tough conditions. He just ignores them.
He's just a true competitor who doesn't take no for an answer. Now the field rejoining here on both sides of the carriageway, repositioning. We don't know what's happened to poor old Robbie Hunter.
Well, he's going to have a hard ride, Phil, because for the moment I actually can't see any team cars behind. There's Roger Hammond. There you can see moving up to the front Stein de Volder. These guys, there's a lot of boys there from Discovery Channel. Armstrong there having a quick word with Roger Hammond. Now Hammond, I'm so happy to see the British national champion on a top squad like this, Phil, because he has battled for many, many years on some of the lesser, what I used to call kermes teams, the small Belgian teams. And he's now finally got the chance at the top. And he will be enjoying riding today with Lance Armstrong. First time they've actually raced together in Discovery Channel jerseys.
That's correct. He started out life as a junior world cyclocross champion. And he's a brilliant rider off-road and over the mud. But this year, the Discovery Channel team told him that they didn't want him to ride cyclocross. He's a multi-British champion at the sport. Always did that to get fit for the summer road racing season. But they said no. He wanted to stay with us, alter your regime, and let's see how it affects him this season. But there's no doubt mentally he's up for this race.
Oh, certainly. Talking to him this morning, he was seriously motivated for this event. As it would appear, is the man on the front there in the pink jersey of T-Mobile, Rolf Aldag. He probably thinks that they've got a three-pronged attack here. This is very dangerous in Belgium. You see these directional islands. You have got to be so alert nowadays as you come into these corners, because if you come in without paying attention, those things, they don't move very well.
No.
And one man actually finished a career because of one of those directional islands. That was the big Belgian sprinter from the 1980s era, and that was Nellison, not Daniel Nellison, Wilfred Nellison.
Wilfred Nellison, yeah.
This is Tommy Vukler.
He tried to come back, but he never was the same again, was he?
Certainly wasn't. This is Tommy Vukler, wearer of the yellow jersey in the Tour de France last year for 10 days. Not quite sure where he is. I think he may well have tried to leap off the front end of the main field.
Yeah, he has.
And decided to sit up and wait, I think.
Well, a nice little bit of riding there, just to show his Championship of France racing jersey there. Over the Schelde, one of the most popular rivers, well, one of the best known rivers here in Belgium. 4 minutes the gap. 97 kilometers to go. That's about 60 miles to race now. And you would think on a normal race this breakaway would have a chance, but this is the Tour de Flanders. Thomas Vukler, good to see him attacking, because the French have a very poor reputation of winning this race. Jacques Giron was the last man to do it, and Vukler has a habit of spoiling the fun for everybody else. He had a wonderful Tour de France last year, rose from a nobody in the sport to a very famous and popular bike rider.
Very popular in France. Tiblon, they call him. He grew up in the island of Martinique in the Caribbean, and in fact now lives in the western part of France. He lives around the area where the Tour de France is going to start this year, and he's been adopted by that region as a local rider. But it's good to see him here, showing his aggression here on the roads of the Tour of Flanders. And he certainly will never be the same bike rider again, having worn the yellow jersey for 10 days. And I was amazed by the courage this guy showed, Phil, in the mountain stages of the Tour de France. He got dropped on one occasion 6 times and still managed to claw his way back into the peloton.
Kept his yellow jersey by about 20 seconds, I think it was. And Armstrong himself says when a man suffers like that, then he deserves to keep the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. A very gracious comment at the time. Well, here we are now as we continue to course across Belgium. There's a good fairground down there, but there's always a fairground in every town around Easter in Belgium.
This is the town square of Oudenaarde. That little building you can just see on the right-hand side there. If you get a chance to come to this part of the world, that's actually the Ronde van Vlaanderen Museum, the Tour of Flanders Museum, and there's some magnificent artifacts in there. And it's actually just at that point that the ladies at Tour of Flanders started this afternoon, and that was where they had the presentation of the Vlaanderen ladies team earlier on this season.
It's also the home of the organiser of the Tour of Flanders, so I guess that's why we go through here, right?
I think it must be very much in the heart of the Flanders, not too far away now for setting ourselves up for the next big climb of the day, the Oude Quaremont, the Old Quaremont. Thomas Voeckler, Bouygues Telecom, looking over his shoulder. Bit of a crazy move, because right now he's only got himself about 50 meters advantage over the front end of the peloton. He's using up a lot of energy on the approach to the Old Quaremont.
It's still a ways to go too to the Quaremont, about 7 or 8 kilometers, just over 5 miles before we start the climb of the Old Quaremont. It's a beautiful climb, and if you go and do it on any other day except race day, then you'll find it a very quiet back road, and you can suffer in complete silence with nobody shouting down your ear. Won't be the way today when we get there, I can assure you of that.
There'll be a lot of people there on the slopes of the Old Quaremont in a few moments' time, and it's a very precarious little approach. There's a thing about riding a race like the Tour of Flanders. You have to get your points of contact fixed into your brain, and I do believe that Lance Armstrong spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks studying the old videos and the old DVDs of the Tour of Flanders route, just to try and refresh his memory on where the trees were, where there were specific little houses where you took the right-hand turn to start certain cobblestone sections. And that makes me think that he's seriously thinking about doing well in this race today.
Oh, I just hope he enjoyed the commentary when he looked at those balls, otherwise we'd be out of work. Anyway, the champion of France in the lead, well, not in the lead, but head of the peloton right now, as they race about 15-20 seconds behind him. Thomas Voeckler looking for the form that might well make him that little bit stronger in the Tour de France this July, where we're delighted to say he'll once again clash swords with Lance Armstrong, who has decided to ride the Tour, we think probably for the last time. There's David Cagnada of the Sonia Duval team, the yellow colours, and returning to the folder full of water bottles is Christophe Mengin of Française des Jeux to hand out to the team. They're on the outskirts of Oudenaarde as well now. That's why 3.5 minutes is probably about right on the GPS system.
Red, white and blue, champion of Holland. This man is a great competitor, and a lot of people are tipping him as a possible favourite to win the event here this afternoon. A very canny bike rider. He's got a great nose for the move, and he knows just exactly when to make his efforts, which is why he's sitting at the back currently, because he knows at this section of the course, Phil, we've got big wide roads. There's hardly any wind, so he doesn't have to worry about the echelons forming. But you watch out, in around about 10-12 kilometers time, he'll skirt up around the outside, and all of a sudden he'll appear at the front of the peloton. There's Matty Heyman, the big Rabobank rider there on the far side with the number 181 on his back. He'll have a lot of responsibilities later on in the day, and that's Mark Wouters, who despite earlier mechanical incidents, he's actually still managed to stay in contact with the main field.
Whatever the problem is, I think he's still experiencing it though. He's calling for his cars again. Servais Knaven has dropped right to the back now, just passed through our screen, having done that driving of the train earlier.
I think this is the moment in the race, this 20-kilometer section between the Wolvenberg and the Old Quaremont, where everybody's getting themselves topped up with drinks, because it's going to be chaos once we get to the Old Quaremont, and there will be an awful lot of fighting to stay at the front end of the group, with the repetitive nature of the Paterberg and the Koppenberg and then the Stekenbergenries.
That's right.
A lot of battling.
I think on average every 5 kilometers after the next climb until the finish we have a challenging mountain, until we get to the last one, the Bosberg. Then it's a 12-kilometer run for home, and by then, if you're strong enough, you plan to be on your own.
Well, Andre Schmiel went over the top of the Bosberg a couple of years ago with a 20-second advantage, and he won the race by 22 seconds. But you've got to be a strong man to do that.
Well, talking to strong men, this is certainly a big man who's making an attack here.
No, this is another move going off the front. And again, one or two riders, I think, taking advantage of the lull in the peloton.
Well, thankfully we've seen his number, because everybody's changing their team colours this year. This is Ralf Grabsch. Well, with all due respect, his team Wiesenhof. I must say I didn't recognise it from the head-on shot, and I've seen them race this year in the Tour de Langkawi and also in the Giro del Capo in South Africa with distinction. And Jens Hepner had a nasty crash in the Giro del Capo, and I see that he's not part of the team today. But as far as I know, he's totally recovered. He fell on his head, so the doctor pulled him out of the 5-day race there in Cape Town.
Max van Heeswijk swinging across there. And if you're just noticing this yellow band on the Discovery Channel jerseys, well, it's very much the same as the Live Strong armband. Every jersey or replica jersey that the team sell throughout the year with that yellow band on it, $1 or €1 or £1 sterling, will be given and donated to the Lance Armstrong Foundation for Testicular Cancer.
And Lance told us this morning that the current sales figure is now a massive 41 million.
It's unbelievable. It really has been an incredible success. So successful that a lot of other people have actually started to copy. There's a flat tire there for Matty Hayman. He's riding
getting a bit
sensibly.
desperate too, isn't he? Because he's been looking for the car for a while now.
Well, this is the problem with the Tour of Flanders. You have to have a puncture at the right time when the main field is followed by the team cars. There's one of the referees coming up, and Matty Hayman, you see, not panicking. He's waiting till the last possible moment, and he will wait till the team car is right behind him before he pulls over, and probably will jump off the bike himself. Looks like the team car's there.
Stein de Volder was the rider who just went by him.
That wasn't his team car, actually. You see, there's chaos here because what's happening is a lot of the riders are dropping back to take on board bottles, and poor old Matty Hayman there has got to wait for his team car to pick its way through that chaos of the race convoy behind.
These are the 5 leaders at the moment at 92 kilometres from the Arnkomst, the finishing line. Barredo, Murray, Backstead doing the driving, Zabaya and Boucher. Marzoli hasn't got back. He's been dropped now, leaving these 5 men all looking pretty good just now. Murray of Française des Jeux, rather of Fassa Bortolo.
8 kilometres to go now to the Old Quaremont. You'll see the front end of the main field start to stretch itself out into a long line as we get to the Old Quaremont. Maggie Backstead doing a lot of work on the front of the group. A member of the Liquigas team, a new team formed to support Mario Cipollini in what must probably be his last season as a professional. But he did have the honour this year of getting Italy's first ever win on the international circuit.
He always gets something, doesn't he? He's an incredible bike rider. This is Moret, Française des Jeux. I think I said he was Fassa Bortolo, but he's Française des Jeux, setting the pace here. And there's Magnus, not looking under too much pressure right now. Still looks pretty cool. We're convinced he's testing himself for next Sunday. He might fool us completely and win the Tour de Flanders. And I'd be the first to say sorry, because it will be a great victory for the Swede. Still up the road there, the one breakaway. About to get joined now by the Wiesenhof rider here, who's closing the gap, Ralf Grabsch. Grabsch, always a strong rider. And this is a very good chunk of publicity for his German team here.
Yep, he's halfway across the gap. This is what I like to call no man's land. He's made this move at around about 8 kilometres to go to the start of the Old Quaremont. And unfortunately, he's probably going to get caught out, because once they get that little bit closer, there'll be a serious acceleration. And what a crowd this is this afternoon. It's a magnificent crowd turning out for the monument of Belgian sport. And good to see the English flag flying there. And that will be flying for Roger de Hammond of Team Discovery Channel, the British national champion, and formerly the British national champion in cyclocross as well. And I actually feel that Discovery Channel have done a very sensible thing, asking him not to ride the cyclocross during the winter months. And I think we'll see him ride a lot stronger Paris-Roubaix this year than he did last season.
Well, he can only improve 2 places, and that'll be the ultimate, wouldn't it?
But last year he rode in a fairly defensive role. This year I think he'll go in with a completely different mentality. He's going in on the side of a team that's got a very good chance of winning, with riders like George Hincapie and the revelation of the early season, I would say, for Belgium, Stein de Volder.
These are the 2 riders now trying to settle themselves down to chase down the 5 leaders. They're taking the time gap off, but it's around about 3 minutes. No, that's Marzoli coming back. So the 5 leaders are now being chased just by Ralf Grabsch, who hasn't won a race since the year 2001. But he's still an extremely good rider. He did finish second in the Tour of Bohemia back in 2003. But he's a solid member of the Wiesenhof team. He hasn't won a race for this team, actually, because he was with Telecom in 2001.
He rode for Telecom for a couple of years, but I remember him from back in 1995. This is the man who went down a lot earlier on, and that's looks very much as if that's Luke Roberts there at the back end of the group. A very seasoned track rider.
World Pursuit record holder in the 4,000 metres, team pursuits. It looks as though the Aussies are out of luck here today, with Oren Kemps crashing as well.
Well, it may well be they were riding together at that point there, because that very often happens. The Anglophiles tend to stick together in the main field so they can have a chat as the race is going by. But Luke Roberts, I'm glad to see, like many of the other Aussie top track cyclists, is moving across to try his hand out at the road.
There's an enormous number of Australian cyclists on top professional teams now. Now, that's not the local club taking the turning on the right. It is, in fact, half the peloton down the cycle path there, which you have to ride on in Belgium, by the way, if you're not in a bike race. It's against the law to actually ride on the highway. Those cycle paths are strictly and very much compulsory. It's just going out to the left of our picture there. I caught a glimpse of Samuel Marzoli. So he's gone from the front to the back in one easy move, but he's had a good day. There's no doubt about that. And this is a Crédit Agricole rider now, and I'm pretty sure it was Thierry Marichal who has just shot off up the left of the road.
Roger Hammond over to the right there in the white jersey. I don't think Hamill will be looking for a high position, because the way he's riding here this afternoon, Phil, I think he's on team orders to look after George Hincapie and, of course, the boss man of Discovery Channel, Lance Armstrong, who is ticking over a very nice low gear, which will keep himself topped up with plenty of energy for the end of this race. And that's what you need. You need that nervous energy at the end of the race if you're going to accelerate over climbs like the Mur de Grammont and the Bosberg.
Well, this is the sort of race that normally we would expect Lance to enjoy riding. He loves his bike racing, but a course that he can really get his teeth into. Plenty of good challenges from the opposition. That makes Lance an even better bike rider. And today the weather will inspire him because it's not raining. Remember him on the cobblestones in the Tour de France last year, when some fine riding by both him and his team. He destroyed the climbers before they even saw a mountain.
You remember what he said at the finish?
I
after
do.
That he said, man, that was so cool. And he really did enjoy it, which I think is why he's probably come back here today with a much more invigorated approach. Yaroslav Ekimov there, just in the light blue jersey there. What a great champion. Olympic champion on 2 occasions, once on the track and once in the individual time trial. And of course the winner just recently of the time trial at the end of the 3 days of La Panna. This man, Phil, has decided he wants to go on and try and equal the record of Joop Zoetemelk with 16 starts in the Tour de France. And I think, you know, he might just do it.
I think he will. I think he will. He seems one of those indefatigable characters who never tire of the regime all along. There's Peter van Petegem. Oh, we've moved away from him. He's right in the centre of the screen there, riding in a oh, there's the crash that we saw earlier. No, it's a different one.
Oh, the motorbike went right over that car, and in fact I think the motorbike went down, and that's what happens if you don't pay attention.
Anyway.
No, it certainly didn't. That cameraman, let's hope he's got up okay.
And the rider who fell there was Cyril Limoine of France, new professional rider who went down there for Crédit Agricole.
Tom Boonen riding close to the front, surrounded by his teammates. And of course it's interesting to see David Lotto moving forward. We just caught the first serious sign of Peter van Petegem.
Yes.
He's a local rider from around here, Phil. He lives in a small town called Brakel, and he knows almost every road around here. But look at Armstrong just on the far side. I'm feeling here that I'm watching the Tour de France. Armstrong is just riding at the first 5 or 10 places, as he does in the month of July, very present. And you remember the prediction I made about 10 kilometers ago. This man was sitting at the back of the group because the roads were wide. There was no problem. There was no worry at all with echelons forming. But Eric Decker now has come up to the front.
Very wise man, and it takes a skillful rider to do that too. And that looks like David Kopp in the white jersey there. He is bang on form and riding extremely well. He won the big race for Wiesenhof recently, the Nacht van Cologne race, I think it's called. And that was an important race for them to win because their team comes from the area where the race is run. And he's very, very good condition right now.
Thor Hushovd moving up there as well. I suppose we could say he's the leader of the Pro Tour in the event here this afternoon. Lies in 6th place overall. Yep. The top 5 men not participating. Let's have a look at just exactly what happened with that crash before. That's Marzoli on the left there. The Crédit Agricole rider there just touches the wheel of the man in front of him. He falls over to the left-hand side, but the motorbike just goes straight over the top. And, well, we won't know till afterwards whether or not he stayed upright, but I think not.
No, it went down. They just tumbled off. They stopped and then they just dropped the bike. So I'm sure they're okay. We certainly need every cameraman at this stage of the Tour of Flanders today. It always amazes me just how well they cover this race, but I think the Belgian television team are superb at this sport, and they should be, of course. This is their sport in their country, and the crowd turn out in their thousands. And they feel, again, dodging around the back of parked cars, always a hazard, of course. You can never relax in a Tour of Flanders. You've got to watch every move. Paul spoke earlier of the crash of Jans Koerts. We are very sorry for Jans because he's a good friend of ours. Took a very nasty injury, and it cut him out of a good result that day. These are the leaders now as we're heading up towards Paul's favourite climb, the Old Quaremont.
The older Quaremont, 86 kilometers to go, and you can see these riders are just approaching. That little banner there indicates that the cobblestone section of the Old Quaremont Phil is just around the corner. They've made it thus far.
We are looking at the 5 leaders in the Tour de Flanders. They've been away for an awful long time now. The gap, as you can see, is 3 minutes and 53 seconds. They're now on to the 3rd climb of the day, the Old Quaremont, and this will test them now. We'll see just who is really strong in this breakaway. It consists of Carlos Barredo, Francis Mouret, Magnus Backstedt, winner of Paris-Roubaix. He's the biggest bike rider in the breakaway here, and Constantino Zabaya and David Boucher. There was a rider here, Samuel Marzoli from Lamprey. He's gone back now. And these 5 now will see the climb first. It starts reasonably smooth, Paul, then you hit the cobblestones.
It starts reasonably smooth, but you know, in the main field, this road here is so narrow. In fact, there's no room for more than 4 or 5 riders across, which is why you've got to be well placed on this climb. I'm starting to get goosebumps now, because to me, this is where the race starts. Not with these 5 guys that we're looking at, but you can't imagine the nervousness in the main field behind, because those guys know this is when the race starts. This is when the action really starts to go. Everyone throws caution to the wind. That's the start of the cobblestones. Not a battle for these 5, but you just wait for 3 minutes and 36 seconds.
Yes.
It's going to be completely different.
And just look at the speed of the peloton now as they race for that very narrow road. They'll have to come right down. Riders at the front. If you're not in the first 30, 40 riders, then you're going to be in big trouble, because there will be riders slipping and sliding. Gears will be jamming. They are absolutely flying towards this climb now. Here's life on the Old Quaremont for the leaders. Kop van der Wedstrijd, head of the race. They're looking for the smooth road, then find it turns against them. They've no choice but to get back on the cobblestones and bounce the way up, and it bites just about there, that climb, as they come up into the town of what is just a small village really of Quaremont, with a nice little coffee shop on the right hand side if you're not in a hurry. But today I thought there's been a crash there as they come round the corner. Lots of riders also gone down there, and it looked to me as though as Van Summeren, Laurent Brochard is the rider in blue, trying to straighten his bike out, and one rider there, and I hope it's not Stuart O'Grady. No, I don't think it was, but his teammate has stopped with him there. It was a Cofidis rider. There's the crash again, and it's all on the right-hand turn into the Quaremont, where the Brochard wrestling to untangle his bike there to get back into the action. And the breakaway itself has started to split up now, as it's Backstedt driving at the front. Francis Mouret has gone off the back there.
Tom Boonen, we've got around that corner safely, and look how clever Eric Decker is. There's no need to battle now for the guys who've got the top 15, 20 places, because in fact there is nowhere to overtake on this road. Eric Decker, as we said earlier, Phil, very canny bike rider, puts himself in the right place at the right time. This man here is having a hard time. David Boucher, he's off the back. This is the flat part of the course. They've gone up the steepest part. It's 11% at the bottom of the climb. But this is where it really starts to get very difficult, because this is a false flat. And as soon as you come out of the town here of Quaremont, you're out into the open fields. And that's when the big, strong bike riders start to really kick in. One of those guys who went down must have been Nico Eickhout, and he was a big pre-race favourite. He's ridden very well over the last couple of months, but he must have gone down very hard.
Opgeven means given up, which means he's come straight out of the race. So that, I think, was the rider we saw on the floor there, where his teammate stopped to try and give him a hand. That's bad luck, because Eickhout is on tremendous winning form just now, and he's a man for Belgium. He doesn't win anywhere else. He just stays in his own country and rides superbly.
Eric Zabel over on the right-hand side, nice and comfortable too. You see, he will have picked his way right through that main field. 2.2 kilometers in length, the Old Quaremont. Only an average of 4.2%, but it's at the bottom that it really kicks in with that 11% gradient.
It's a nasty little climb, but the boys who... all the racing's done before they get to the climb. There's Peter Van Petegem peeping into our picture now. So we've got Bonen, Van Petegem, Zabel, 3 real favourites to win this race, showing yet again their intelligence of riding at the front of the bunch.
In about 15th place as well, I saw Armstrong. There's Hincapie over to the right-hand side. He knows this race. And by the way, Kern, the race that he won, actually goes over this climb as well. So Hincapie will be feeling very much at home here in Belgium. And let's not forget, he spent a lot of time living here in the early part of his career when he lived in a small town of Gullegem, just outside of Kortrijk, with Frankie Andreu.
Now we're seeing the peloton just nicely under control here now. Steady tempo riding being done by Quick Step. Tom Bonen just wanting to sit there in third wheel. Just behind him is Van Petegem. Meanwhile, at the top of the climb, there are only 3 riders left now. Barredo is the one at the back. Zabea is on good form. He was 3rd in Paris-Nice overall, but he's not as known as a single-day rider. He's a multi-day rider, but he'll be a good ally for Backstedt just now. Here's life's not so pleasant in the peloton, as they're not very far behind now. They're saying 3 minutes, so that's what it must be. But they're also on the climb. as the other three just go over the top.
What a great day. You very rarely see such a beautiful day for the Tour of Flanders. A lot of the Flemish will probably complain, Phil, by saying it's not a real Tour of Flanders because it should be raining, it should be wet, it should be windy.
Picture.
But it is a great picture for the sport. It really shows off the Flanders here this afternoon. These men here on the front for Quick-Step, just thinking about the man in third position there, Tom Boonen. And I asked him before the start if he thought he was a little bit too young to win this race. He said, well, I'm hoping to prove that you can win this race if you're less than 30 years of age.
Yes, that's right. I think it's the last 4 winners have been over 30. Well, we'll see.
Well, you need the experience in a race like this, and you also need to be a tough man as well. Riders like Andre Schmil, riders like Johan Museo knew all about this bike race. But one regret, I suppose, at the end of his career would have to be Sean Kelly, who was so close to winning this race on a number of occasions. In fact, he finished second once in the sprint to Adrie van der Poel, but he never quite got that elusive win.
No, he was second in 84, 86 and 87. And Sean Kelly now not too far away from us, commentating for a European channel. And probably living every pedal rev with these bike riders, because this undoubtedly was his biggest disappointment of his career. He never won La Ronde, and he won just about everything else worth having except the Tour de France. He even won what it was until Eric Zabel came along, a record number of green jerseys, and he once finished 4th in that event as well. So there's the group now. They're just over the painful section of the old Quaremont, so he's set course now for the Peterberg. And that'll be 80 kilometers from the finish when we get there. Plenty of pacemaking there. 3 minutes 2 seconds, just gone up by a second. All breathe a sigh of relief. There's the Flandrian flag, the line on it, indicating a blockhead win for the riders at the moment.
Blockhead win, but they'll turn left at the top of this onto a wide road for just around about a kilometer, then a very rapid descent to the bottom of the nasty climb of the Paterberg, and then just 6 kilometers after that it's the Koppenberg. So basically over the next 10 kilometers the menu of the day is climbing.
I gotta hate the Koppenberg because I found it almost impossible to climb up even when there was nobody else on the road. It's a nasty little climb.
Well, it's a lot
more
easier now.
More the bottom there.
It's a lot easier now, Phil, because they've actually resurfaced the Koppenberg. I remember when the advent of plastic-soled shoes came out, we actually used to stick rubber on the bottom of our plastic-soled shoes for the Koppenberg event, because otherwise, with the plastic soles on the shoes, you actually couldn't walk up the event because it was so wet and slippery.
That's right, so you have to whip your shoes off, run up, put them back on, and catch up if you can.
If you can, that's the onus. There's Thor Hushovden around about 15th position on the right-hand side there. Quick-Step very much in control. Peter van Petegem right up to the front end of the main field. I've seen George Hincapie in the top 15 or 20 places, and I do believe that I saw Lance Armstrong. Now, they've come straight across here. Now, this road, just for interest's sake, is called the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat, or the Tour of Flanders Street, named after the great bike race that has gone over it on many, many occasions. Peter van Petegem over on the left-hand side. And there's confirmation of the name of the street for you.
That was just to prove that you only tell the truth, Paul.
Oh, well, that's good. There you can see the monument there to Karel van der Waele as these riders meander up there. I think just again turning off the gas a fraction, because from the top of the climb of the old Quaremont, it's just 4 kilometers to the Paterberg. I think chance for everybody to see and just check out whether or not anybody missed out. Stuart O'Grady at the front end of the group as well.
Meanwhile, we've got 4 riders back up here now. So one has got back. Boucher of France has got back. Moret is still behind as far as we know.
Off the top of the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat and the road to Ronse. Now a slight downhill section. You see how much narrower these roads are now. This is what the Tour of Flanders is all about. These very windy, twisty roads are very difficult indeed to move forward if you're in the main field, and which is why you've got to, from now on, basically, Phil, sit in the first 15 or 20 places. Oh, that was a bit nasty.
That was a bit dangerous. That it bounced back. It fortunately hit his wheel and came safety, but have to be ever so careful. We're just going to have a look at that again now. This has been a good billiard shot, this.
It was pretty unlucky. Pretty unlucky there, but I suppose lucky for Boucher. Now, this is the start of the Paterberg. Look at this for a difference. It's only 350 meters in length, but it's 20%. Oh, yes. You really got to go to the bottom end of the gear ratios here.
Boucher is trying to keep his rhythm here because he's only just come back on from the previous climb of the Quaremont, and it looks like he's about to go off again on the Paterberg. 3 minutes 3. This gap has been pretty much the same since over 50 kilometres now. They keep improving, and then it drops back again.
Well, it'll start to turn towards the negatory, I would say, quite shortly, because the main field are going to take a lot of attention on these steep climbs. This is a brute of a climb. It's very difficult actually to climb climbs like this out of the saddle, because you start to lose traction in the back wheel. Big Maggie Baxter there is all over his machine, and I think that's probably for why he prefers Paris-Roubaix, because the cobblestones at least there are flat.
Well, you see, little Burrido on the right here is a very good climber, second-year pro, but he's a very good climber. He's not having anything like the difficulty of Bagstead. The only difficulty he's got is trying to get round him. Oh, they've virtually pushed him off here. The crowd is so enthusiastic, but they'll get him going again. How about a helping hand from the police? There we are. And we continue on our way to the top of the Paterberg. What a wonderful race this is. I'm not sure the riders agree all the time with our comments, but from a pure spectator's viewpoint, this is an exceptional race. The crowd narrowing it down so that Burrido, in fact, was forced onto the back wheel of Magnus, and they both came to a temporary standstill.
And not very easy to get going, especially on that gradient. That was the steepest part of the climb, just around about 20%. We're inside the 3-minute mark now quite comfortably, with 80 kilometres to go. And it's Quick Step on the front, and I have a feeling that Quick Step might be just laying it on the line just a little bit too early here, because if you cast your mind back to how Johan Museeuw used to win this race, you never actually saw him until around about 30 kilometres to go, and already I've seen Tom Bonen showing his cards at the front of the peloton.
That is true, and I must say Peter van Peterberg riding the race exactly as he always does. Makes sure when it matters he's just off the head of the field, but he doesn't actually drive the pace. He just watches what's going on. And then he makes his move. I suspect he'll try something around about the Mur de Grammont. We'll see. But having seen what's just happened on the climb there, very narrow roads with the crowd encroaching, it's going to be a much more difficult journey up that climb by the peloton, and it's going to make interesting spectating, I think.
Well, they're going to tackle this climb in single file. That's absolutely certain. Inside of 80 kilometres to go, less than 50 miles to go to the finish. And you can see that the old Quaremont, as always, has sorted out the main field. A nice long line there, as these riders now will be setting themselves up for the Paterberg. And it's a dangerous moment to have a mechanical incident here, because the fact is that on the old Quaremont, a lot of riders will have been dropped, and a lot of the team cars will be a long way back.
A lot. And the further we got down the line, the bigger the gaps appeared there, riders rejoining from the last climb. We're now on the climb of the Paterberg with around about 80 kilometres to go, or 50 miles. The group is still chasing at 2 minutes 44 seconds. 4 leaders now. They did split on the climb of the old Quaremont, but one of them got back, Boucher, and they're riding pretty steady at the front. But look at this, Paul. They're driving now by Tom Bonen's Quick Step squad.
Well, Bonen himself being very serious on the right-hand side there, always at the front in these dangerous moments. Struggling a little bit as the 20% gradient starts to kick in. Eric Zahl riding well up at the front end of the main field all of the time, but still, when we looked down from the helicopter a few moments ago, that was a very large main field. It certainly hasn't started to split up yet at all.
Well, the gap is coming down, but that's not the main object of the exercise right now. They expect to catch those. It is just to keep position at the head of the race on the climbs of the day. This is the 4th climb of 17, remember. And although the gap continues to fall, they're more concerned with position in the peloton. Further back, it is total chaos now, and it's survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. Ride at the front end if you can. If you drop back to 25th or 30th place, move up as quickly as you can to stay up at the front of the race and out of danger. The window, Phil, is starting to pick up quite a bit, and that's going to be a problem later on in the event for a lot of these riders. O'Grady there just going through a fair way back.
Down. Yeah.
A long way back for him. That's Martin Den Bakker going through as well, a very serious professional bike rider. Rolf Aldag in the pink there for T-Mobile, paying for the efforts that he'd put in earlier on for the team. Still, if we pull back and wait, there's a lot of riders still in contention here. It certainly hasn't yet started to split up and kick in.
Gaps are opening at the back end now. The South African sprinter Robbie Hunter jammed his gears and his chain. He went back for service. We haven't seen him since. It's a fact of life now that if you have a mechanical or a flat tyre at this stage of the race, the chances are you will be on the short route to the changing rooms, because by the time your car helps you, you simply can't catch up again. The hills are coming every 4 or 5 kilometres now, and just as you recover, you get hit again. Oops, and as you see, there's trouble here. It's not so easy at the back, is it?
It certainly isn't. Domino Vacanzi there having a problem and having to stop and restart, and restarting at 20% gradient is certainly not very easy at all. But you mentioned about going for an early shower or an early bath. Well, in fact, most of the riders here in the Tour of Flanders, if they have a problem, they'll usually actually ride back to the finishing line in Meribek, because at any one point now they're never really very much more than 35 kilometers to the finish, because this race just zigzags along this stretch of little Flandrian mountains between here and Ninove and Meribek, the finish.
That's right. You may wonder sometimes how we know when riders have given up, and it's usually because they've just ridden past our commentary box and there's still 2 hours to race, because there are shorter routes back to the finish where we're commentating from, of course. 2.5 minutes will give them no cause for concern back in the peloton. This has been a good show of force by Magnus Backstedt, principally of this breakaway. I'm sure he's using this race now as preparation for Paris-Roubaix next week. When he gets caught, I would expect he will abandon, but you never know. 77 kilometers then to go. 4 riders in front. The next climb after the Peterberg will be the Koppenberg, and this is a brute.
Just 4 kilometers now to go to the Koppenberg, and these lads will know exactly what it's all about. Many of them have spent a lot of time. It's 4 kilometers to the top, 2 kilometers to the bottom, and it's just on the little black area you can see in front of us. Not very much of a climb. Climbs up again around about 100 meters, but it's the severity. This climb averages about 20%, and the steepest part is 25%, and it really is nasty.
Well, these are beautiful roads here in this region. They're always narrow, of course, and there's very little traffic used them on normal days, and it's a real pleasure to go cycling in this area. But today, of course, it is the big day for Belgian cycling. The Tour of Flanders is the big one. Everybody wants to win it. If you're Belgium, you want to win it twice. There's the field trying to get itself reorganized, but it's all a question of high speed and get into a position if you can. Gap continues just to chisel off the odd second or so at 76 kilometers from the front. That looks quite a sizable group there, establishing a gap over the peloton.
Split again, and what you were saying before about being a Belgian and wanting to win, but if you're Flemish and you come from Brakel, your name is Peter van Petegem, you want to win it for a 3rd time, and I'm sure he's thinking about that. He has the experience, he has the knowledge, and that's rather a strange split there, because the split has actually happened just over the top of the Paterberg, and these riders are really making a serious chase, and you see there are no cars behind. That's an indication that there's still a lot more riders back, and that's why teams will have discussed the tactics of what happens in a moment like this. If Hincapie or Armstrong or Roger Hammond have a flat tyre, you can see here on the front though, Quick Step have got it all under control. They've probably heard there's a bit of a split. They want to go to the Koppenberg without too much confusion, but Van Petegem was there. Again, not at the front,
just watching,
just there and thereabouts, waiting.
But this is looking a little bit serious here. This is a serious split, and it's all down to the driving of Quick Step, and they're taking Tom Bonen and Peter van Petegem, the 2 #1 Belgian riders, as likely winners. They will try to make the most of this, I think, and it's up to the rest to try and shut it down.
Nice and comfortable. It means there will not be that much confusion for the leaders when they get to the slopes here. Sitting on the front, Quick Step are really doing a very good job here looking after their man. It looks like Nick Noyen's on the front end of the group, trying to whip it up a little bit further back. You can see the presence there of it looked like Stefan Weissermann. There's 2 or 3 riders in there from Discovery Channel. They were a little bit too far back to identify, but I didn't see a large rider, and that the man I'm looking for in fact is George Hincapie.
Well, there's around about 30 riders here, enough to make this a survival group all the way home if they can pull it together, and that will cause consternation in the back, because 2 favourites we know of are in the front at the moment. 2 minutes 11 seconds the gap to the 3 riders who are leading.
Just notice the cars going the wrong way there. In fact, the cars are not allowed to go over the Koppenberg. It's too steep. That's a Francis Mouret, the Française de Jeu rider. He's caught in no man's land. There are 4 riders in front. This man is chasing at around about 35 seconds. I think if we pull back, we'll find that it's closer to 2 minutes and 11 seconds, because there's the front end of the main field as we start now the approach to the Koppenberg. Not too far away. Now's the time to start to get just that little bit nervous.
30+ riders here, about to pick up Francis Moret, leaving 4 riders up ahead, that's all, as the Union flag of Great Britain flies proudly for Roger Hammond, I would suspect, today, and indeed Jeremy Hunt. They are the only 2 British riders taking part. 20% in old language, it's 1 in 5. These are the 4 leaders now as they approach, the 4 leaders approaching the climb now of the famed Koppenberg climb. This is the 5th climb of the day, and while we look at these 4 leaders, we now know that there is a group of just over 30 riders clear of the field. It's caused by the pacemaking of Quick Step. It is a very serious breakaway containing Tom Bonen and indeed Peter van Petegem. What we're waiting for, Paul, is to see who is there on the Discovery Channel team. We have seen a couple of jerseys, but we don't know who they are yet.
I think I caught a good sign there of Vyacheslav Ekimov. He's always enjoyed this bike race. In fact, he's done very well in it in the past. But I wouldn't be surprised to spot Lance Armstrong in that group, because he was very attentive over the Old Quaremont. You see just how difficult this climb is. The riders here are very lucky that there is not a damp film of water on the road here this afternoon, as Magnus Backstedt is all over that machine. Constantino Zabaya on the right-hand side looks reasonably comfortable, if you can be comfortable at 20%. And Boucher, I think, finally, Phil, has paid the toll of being in what I like to call the early morning breakaway. I don't think he'll make contact again.
No, I think this time it is curtains for him, and Maggie, as we affectionately call him, is going to have to work very hard to hold on now. They need him up front once we get over the climb, of course, so they don't want to leave him too far behind. But this is a very, very steep climb. The crowd being put behind the fence of the local field there to let the riders see the whole of it. It's as far as you can see, and that is the top. But it is so steep. Here's that peloton now of some 30 riders. And Quick Step are in big numbers here. We need to get down amongst it, but our cameras aren't allowed at this minute as they swing now towards the start of the Koppenberg as well. There are a number of splits, and I would think a little bit of panic going on down there now, with some favourites like Bonen and Van Petegem having made the split.
There's got to be panic for a lot of riders, because it was actually on the downhill that this race split like it did. In a bit of time, we might be able to get in there and just see who is present. And as you can see there, 680 metres the climb, 20% at its maximum. And Eric Dekker's there. Very sensible bike rider. Tom Bonen, we know, was there. It was his team who did the majority of the pacemaking. And I've got a funny feeling that is Ekimov just there in about 6th or 7th place.
Well, there are 3 riders that I can see, Paul, from Discovery.
Here's the rest of the
now
troops.
This is the main field, closing in rather quickly, so it's not so decisive. The lone Norwegian flag on the left is for Thor Hushoft, and he's not in this group, because we would have seen him in his champions jersey. He'll be possibly in the 2nd group. They look close, you know, but this is so steep, this climb. They're not actually as close as they appear.
Around about 30 seconds, actually, from this group to the 2nd group. Now there you can see Bonen in 2nd place, looking very strong.
Almost climbing into the television set here to see who they are. There's George. Big George confirmed, going through. Armstrong not here now.
Stein de Volder is there as well, just tagging on the back of the group. But that gap has come down pretty dramatically here, and we'll get a chance to see who's riding across. It's Armstrong in the middle. Look at him,
yeah.
He's riding.
Armstrong very close to rejoining.
Battling that bike. There he is, right in the middle.
And Stuart O'Grady also trying to get up. So they're trying to repair the damage. We don't know how the split came, but it wasn't on the climb. It was over the top. Maybe there'd been a tumble we didn't see, but the split was suddenly there.
Very strange split that formed, but I have a feeling that the top 10 or 15 riders from that 2nd group may well just get the junction once we go over the top here of the Koppenberg. An incredible climb with a lot of history attached to it.
Didn't see any walkers there, but I'll tell you, it won't be long before 1 or 2 try to exercise their feet near the end of the field.
There's a walker for you, Phil.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that, of course, because whenever you do it, that happens, doesn't it?
If you stop, it is very, very difficult to get going on cobblestones at 25%. And this man here, I think, has decided the better part of valor is to walk up and try and get going again at the top.
Sometimes you can walk as fast as they can ride, but it's difficult to get going again. Anyway, there's a little bit of a coming togetherness. This is the 30. Those 5 have climbed away from the 30 just now.
Oh, it hurts. It really hurts, this climb. It is a horrible climb, and if you're not feeling all that good, it's like a man with a big hammer just standing in front of you, banging you all over the top of your crash helmet. And these guys, I don't think we'll see the front again in the Tour of Flanders. We have, strangely enough, had a very serious sorting out between the Paterberg and the Koppenberg, and that was actually on the flatter part of the route.
There's so much ahead that can destroy the field. They've hit it so hard today. It was Telecom doing the work, then it was Quick Step, and Discovery have had the moment with riders right up there as well. But as we now move rapidly towards the front, it looks like these two groups will rejoin here. In fact, there's no big effort being put in, but it just shows you the strength of Tom Bonen, because he used it well. And also it's Andreas Clear there, the telecom boy, looking over his shoulder at the back. And is that Van Petegem alongside them as well, the Lotto rider?
Looks like Van Petegem.
It does. But he's marking Bonen, you see, everywhere he goes.
He will. It's just like in the old days. Van Petegem used to mark Johan Museeuw right down to the wire. I think he's changed his allegiance now to marking down the man who they regard as the new young lion of Flanders, Tom Bonen. Riding very well for a young professional bike rider, Phil, because normally they say you've got to have a lot of experience to do well in the Tour of Flanders, but he may well be disproving that point here this afternoon, because he's riding so far with so much confidence at 71 kilometers to go.
But he's such an incredibly confident rider. He comes to this race already with 5 victories this season, and he won 24 races last year. And he's had 26 wins in total. Well, he's had 31 wins if you include all of his victories since he turned professional back in 2002, which is not very long ago. And he's only 24 years of age. Looking down there on the field, 3 riders together at the front. They are the survivors of the original breakaway of 6, which all came together around about 133 kilometers from the finish. We're now at 71. And they were wise to wait for Maggie, because he's a good man to have on the flat, even if he hates the cobble climbs. They can always ride him off, perhaps, when they get to the Mur de Grammont, the wall of Grammont, if they've got the legs, and if indeed they're still in the lead, which will be highly unlikely.
Well, in a few kilometers' time, they'll find themselves on the slopes of the 6th climb of the day, the Steenbeck Dries. That is a nasty climb, and you can see 1 or 2. There's a small group coming across there, and I wonder who is in that group of riders who's trying to make the gap. And you can see how much damage the Koppenberg has done there. Those guys almost came into contact, and it's stretched out again. It's the old elastic story again, isn't it? Stretching out, coming back together, stretching out until the moment when it finally snaps, and the guys who've got caught out at the back end of the group just cannot make contact anymore.
The legs give up, as well as the mental approach to the event as well, I think, because you keep on getting battered at the back. In the end, you say, oh, that's it, I'm going back to the changing rooms.
Probably here they would say, oh, it's not possible anymore, as they would in this part of the world. Now the group, Phil, sitting up, taking note of who's missing, who's around, as we rejoin the 3 leaders. De Kop van der Wegstrijd, the front end of the bike race.
I'll tell you what, though, Paul, this youngster here, Carlos Peredo, he's a real discovery. He's second-year pro. He's already won 1 race last year. He looks quite slightly built. He should be a great climber. And here he is. He's proving quite a powerhouse here today.
Well, Liberty Seguros, I think, is rebuilding a brand new team. Let's not forget they were a massive team for many, many years, with riders like Laurent Jalabert in the old days when they were the Once squad. But I think they are starting to rebuild themselves with riders like Aaron Kemps, with riders like Contador, who just recently won Semana Catalana. It's the new guard of Spanish cycling, I think, coming through.
Well, Contador returning after a near-death crash a couple of years ago, but he's having his best season, and everybody delighted for him. Over the cobblestones we continue.
This is the Casella, the cobblestones, 2.1 kilometers, a fairly flat section of cobblestones that the riders are charging over here, with around about 70 kilometers left to go to the finish. This little cobblestone section here is certainly a very difficult section of cobblestones, and this is known as the cobblestones of Etikove, or Mariaborstraat. 3 leaders. Every time they get to the cobblestone sections now, Phil, will start to lose time on every occasion, and of course once they get to the repetitive nature of the hills, I think quite shortly they'll be back in the fold. 69 kilometers to go into the feeding station for the advanced scouts of what was the peloton, containing certainly 3 favourites we know of: George Hincapie of the USA, Tom Bonen of Belgium, and his teammate also there, or not his teammate, his countryman rather, Peter Van Petegem. Looks like Eric Zabel here winding his way through the feeding station. A very clever move by him. Wait till everybody's watching himself. Yeah. Well, Zabel, not a major favourite, but a man who you can never discount. That looks like Raster, the Swiss rider who's come across to him. Zabel can ride, I think, today with a little bit of freedom, because he's not got a big ticket on his back as a big favourite, but he's the kind of rider who you must always be very wary of, because he's a quality rider.
Yep.
And although he's a sprinter, he's not scared of having a go.
So we're looking at 2 riders in the lead of the group. Of course, we've still got 3 riders up the road, and the crowd, wherever it's possible, standing in large groups here. This is one race they count the days to, and they've chosen a beautiful day today. Yeah, this is a chance to have a look at the group here as we start the breakaway, and it is indeed Gregory Rast, who's the champion of Switzerland.
Maria Boerstraat, 2.1 kilometers. Op de cassé, as the Belgians say, up on the cobblestones, and these 2 riders have got themselves very quickly an advantage of around about 20 seconds. So a good move by these 2 men. Erik Zabel riding with a certain amount of freedom. He doesn't have to worry too much about the responsibility of leading the team, because today that role really belongs to Stefan Weisman and Andreas Clear, as we rejoin the 3 leaders on this very difficult Steenbeek-Dries climb. Again, rather a difficult little climb, and looking at these 3 men at the front, Phil, I think the impetus has gone out of it now. The heart has gone out of it. They know that they're actually riding on borrowed time. They're going to get caught quite shortly.
A minute 34, it won't be long now. But even so, they're going to continue to give this as much as they've got left in the tank. Steenbeek-Dries.
Well, if you want to make yourself seasick, in fact, just 2 kilometers after the top of this climb, they've got another climb rearing up at them. That's the Tyenberg. And the Tyenberg, to me, is a climb which is almost as steep as the Koppenberg. And these riders now will really starting to get indigestion, I think, because of the number and the repetitive nature of these climbs that are getting thrown straight up at them.
Belgium is a country of 2 tails, really.
Flat. It's supposed to be flat
it's
here, isn't it?
Apparently, I've not found those roads. You've either got the Flemish mountains, or you've got the Walloon Ardennes, and both sides totally different in character, and so too the people, really. One side speaks French and one side speaks a form of Dutch, Flemish.
Been a big regrouping there in that front end of the peloton. It was down to around about 30 riders. That's just Erik Zabel around the corner with Gregory Rast of Phonak. But in fact, that group behind is starting to form, and I think 1 or 2 riders did send the alarm bells ringing. Look at the power of Erik Zabel there.
He's left Rast.
He's a great bike rider, Erik Zabel. He's a strong bike rider, and I think today he's probably looking to do something rather special.
Well, he's certainly making sure that we recognise and see him again. Now we've got somebody dropping back there. That's Boucher being caught. So they've only got the 3 riders ahead of the rest of the race right now, as they're on this climb of the Steenbeek-Dries.
Boonen. I think Boonen is riding very close to the front, Phil, on all occasions here. Eric Dekker, you notice how Dekker's always there. There is Peter van Petegem in about 6th position. Van Petegem is always riding in the shelter of the wind. He's right in the middle of the pack. Experienced bike rider, hasn't had a win for a couple of years, but when he does get a win, it's usually a big one.
I tell you what a talent Boonen is. Just sitting there, his team doing the work for him. Looking 24, superb.
Just 24 years of age. It's amazing. He was discovered again by Johan Brunel, but on that occasion, US Postal Service couldn't keep him in contact. Anders Oog.
He did well there. Had that problem not long ago, Paul, to be this close to the front.
Yep, he's just holding on to the back end of the main field, but to come back to Tom Boonen, it was a bit unfortunate that Johan Brunel wasn't able to keep him on board, and I think they've been looking around to try and find themselves a new Belgium, the new Discovery team, and Stijn de Volder might be the man. But you don't get very many come along like there's Boucher just about to get caught. It'll be straight into the group, and I would think
straight out again,
out to the back of it.
But he's had his moment in the Tour of Flanders. You can't take that away from him. He's been up there and led for a long time today. Now he's checking out, and this group has swollen quite a lot, hasn't it? Because you look down the line now, it looks like we could be 60 riders here.
So over the railway bridge, and these guys all know that there's again followed by a very sharp right-hand bend, and then they'll be on the slopes of the Tyenberg. The 3 leaders will be getting information all of the time. Barredo, Backstedt and Zabaya. Zabaya, I think, is riding very well for a man who's much more at home riding the multi-day stage races. But here, because of the new Pro Tour format, he's riding for Saunier Duval in this very, very beautiful Ronde van Vlaanderen today.
Yes, spring is on the way. Not quite leaves on the trees, but they'll be here next week if we have a few more days like this. Remember, this is the week for Belgium now. On Wednesday, the riders will be up again for the big race, and that is Gent-Wevelgem. Then they'll have the Grand Prix Pinot Sarami, and then they'll be following that with moving not very far to France and taking that as well. And we can just tell you, by the way, as we sit here commentating, Miriam Melchers has just won the Tour of Flanders for women right before our eyes on her own, ahead of the world champion Suzanne Lundskog. that's all the riders have finished right now, so we'll stay with the action here in the Tour of Flanders.
These guys are suffering now at the Tyenberg, but amazing crowd turning out, getting behind everybody. But they will, in the back of their mind, I think, Phil, be hoping that they can throw their support to a man by the name of Tom Boonen. There's Zabaya. Yep, but if we look here at the start of the Tyenberg.
As the riders now get to grips with the Tyenberg, let's see what happens here on the next decisive moment of this year's Tour of Flanders. It is going to be a very, very difficult race in the finale, because there are still a lot of riders who've got themselves back into the picture. At a minute and a half, very soon they'll be up with the leaders, that's for sure. The crowd's watching as they come round the bends that snake the way onto the Tyenberg. 3 riders only survive up in front. 1.5 minutes the gap, 66 kilometres to go. A little bit of picture breakup, which we apologise for. There's nothing we can do about it. The champion of Switzerland, Raats, is about to meet the rest of the field again, and here they come. Once they hit the cobblestones and the climbs, they become inspired. But look at this now, pacemaking at the front by Peter van Petegem, and this is a tester for him.
A little bit of a test of the legs here, just seeing who's got the legs to come with him. Stefan Weseman moving up there, Andreas Clear not too far away as well. And Tom Boonen again moving up there into 3rd place in the light blue jersey of Quick Step. He's a man who is much better reputed as a sprinter at the end of the big one-day races, but here this afternoon he's got to take the responsibility of being the new hope for Belgium. Van Petegem makes these cobble climbs look so easy the way he just cruises up them.
Erik Zabel, the champion of the day for Germany. He really is a superb bike rider. He gets older, but he doesn't get any slower. Continues to drive on the nice smooth gutter of the road here, having a pleasant ride up the Tyenberg today.
He's getting reinforcements too in the shape of Peter van Petegem. But the thing about Erik Zabel, he's been able to ride through there with great ease and not had to battle to get himself into a nice position for the start of the Tyenberg. And they don't have much respite, Phil, because in about 5 kilometres time, and you weren't far off with your prediction, there's a climb every 5 or 6 kilometres. The next climb of the day is going to be the Eichenberg.
Well, Eric is just tapping over those pedals now, waiting to be joined by the breakaway, or by the main field, or the sharp end of the race, if you like. It's certainly not the whole field. Anthony Jeslan is up there. He had a problem earlier on, but there he is.
He's having a problem, I think, staying in contact with the main field as well, there, because these riders certainly are suffering. Look at the time gap now. It's down to around about the 1 minute margin. And these riders will now, in this main field, start to realise just exactly where their prey is, because they'll be looking at the race helicopter hovering above the 3 leaders.
1:04. They're almost going to see it, as you say. They'll see the helicopter now. Let's look a little look at the back of the race again here. This is Martin Elminger, former champion of Switzerland. There's a touch of wheels for Jeslan.
So that's what happened to him. He was actually
because he lost his ground.
Incident, he lost the wheel, and that can be psychologically painful for a rider who's been maybe suffering for the last 15 or 20 kilometres, and that's often the last straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think he may well give up and not be able to reintegrate this group. Boonen looking very strong and very confident.
The reason he's come to the front is because Van Petegem went to the front, and it's now become a war of not attrition, but a clash of personalities now as they mark each other here. Side by side they come round the corner until somebody overshot it. Took Boonen off the course as well. Van Petegem, the brilliant bike handler he is, but that won't go down well.
Boonen nearly lost it there.
Oh, he did. He went straight off.
He was actually locking up. He got his foot out, and that's a big advantage, I have to say, with the clipless pedals nowadays, because he
I have to say, Paul,
it.
How many times does a young amateur get told off about undertaking on a left-hand bend like that?
Well, I don't think that was his fault. It was, in fact,
no, not Bones. It was the other rider.
Pozzato, I think it was, coming up there, who was the man who really caused the problem there. And he certainly didn't know the road as well as the other men in the group with him. And he certainly got caught out, and I bet his heart rate went up pretty high.
Yes, well, the skill of Van Petegem, he didn't alter his line at all. He held his bike straight, but Boonen had nowhere to go. And fortunately, too, he hasn't had a flat tyre over that rough ride, because I don't think there's any cars behind this breakaway group at all just yet, because they're blocked.
So time for these riders to just recuperate a fraction. Vyacheslav Ekimov. Tough man, Ekimov, Phil. He's been around for many, many years. It was 1988 when he got his first Olympic gold medal, and that was in the pursuit back in the Seoul Olympics, and he's been at the top of the sport ever since then.
Sadly, I was there. I remember it. I had to ask how to spell his name.
Well, you know now, because we've talked about him so much over the last few years, and he's been a great competitor, and another one of those riders who went into retirement and found that after 3 or 4 months rest he wanted to come back into the sport, and he's a major ally for Lance Armstrong, and at the Tour de France he completely and utterly dedicates himself to the man from Austin.
But the man from Austin, I think, has desisted. I don't think he's in this group at all now, but we could be wrong, because in fact there's a number of riders rejoined at the back because of the nature of the course. Our cameras cannot get in amongst the rides at this stage of the race, so we only really know who is at the head of affairs, unless we're lucky enough to have a helicopter shot and can pick them out.
Next climb to Eichenberg. Van Petegem looking over his shoulders. This is very much a psychological moment now, as the big master starts to get himself to the front to, I think, put his personality on this group.
So we're looking now at Eric Zabel and the rest of the race here, which is the elite at the moment of the Tour de Flanders, at 63 kilometers to go. They're now only 56 seconds behind the 3 survivors of the morning breakaway as we're heading up toward the Eichenberg, and then there's still plenty of climbing to come today in the Tour de Flanders. The group did swell, but as you can see now, it's split again on the Tyenberg, and now it's up to them to try and get back. We know George Hincapie is here. We've seen him, but we're not sure the whereabouts of Lance Armstrong yet.
I think we'll get a chance to see the position of everybody in this race once we get to the Eichenberg, and it's scary to think, Phil, that we've got 63 kilometers to go and still got 9 very difficult climbs. The next one is the Eichenberg. The last one is the Bosberg, and that comes in at just 12 miles to go to the finish. These guys are not working right now, I think, because there are too many heads of state in the group. Thor Hushovd is in there, just sitting at the back, 6th overall in the Pro Tour, as they now are slowly but surely clawing their way forward to this prey roundabout. This left-hand bend is where the Eichenberg starts, and there are the cobblestones.
So we're now on to the climb of the Eichenberg. There's the graphic at 10%, or 1 in 10. It is about 1.2 kilometers. These are the same 3 riders, but really they are the 3 survivors now of the 6 who broke clear very early on today and in the chasing group, and they've just split again as they've come over the Tyenberg. Still in that lead group we know is Zabel, Van Petegem and Tom Bonen. We're waiting for confirmation that Hincapie has made the split, although I don't think it's going to be significant now, because if he's not in the group, he'll be in this group which is about to rejoin.
There's been a lot of yo-yoing so far. A lot of times the race has split up and come back together. The leading group of 3 on the slopes of the Eichenberg, but the rest of the main field are also on the slopes of the Eichenberg too. This young man at the back is doing a great job, Carlos Barredo from Team Liberty Seguros, and there you can see the charging of the main field. And once you make contact like that, you've got to take all of the risks that you can and go straight to the front of the group if you've got any force at all, because again, 1 or 2 riders are going to get dropped on this climb.
Well, the motorbikes are getting a little bit too close for comfort, I would think, right now, although it's a nice picture from our point of view, because this is from the first motorbike, as now the peloton led by Fassa Bortolo. Still got a couple of candidates there. The Pro Tour leader, and I say that in quotations, Alessandro Patacchi, not here. Winner of Milan San Remo. Neither is the world champion Oscar Freire. We're watching at those 3 riders now. I think again Bagstead hates these climbs. He's far too heavy to get over them with the fluidity of the other 2 lighter riders. He's going to be in trouble again.
Van Petegem, look how comfortable he is on the right-hand side. He's not too far away from home. I would think he could throw a stone and hit his house from here. He knows all of these roads. He trains on them all of the time. And you can see a lot of guys now starting to feel the pressure of this race as we approach around about 1.5 hours to go to the finish.
And the gap is almost over now. Van Petegem, who's looking to win for a 3rd time today, and by consequence will become one of only 5 men to do that. Nobody's ever won it 4 times, and it looks as though still some good riding. Zabaya is magnificent, 3rd in Paris-Nice. Loves the climbs, of course, but he's not normally noted as a one-day rider, and Bagstead is riding better, I think.
Well, but Zabaya was in 2nd place for a long time in Paris-Nice, in fact up until the final day when Alejandro Valverde won the last stage and got a time bonus to leap up into 2nd. But it's a sign that Zabaya's got good condition in the early part of the season. Tom Bonen riding at the front of the group, we get a chance to see the damage that's being done here at the rear, and Mirko Lorenzetto going off the back here for Dominic Vacanzi. You can just see and feel the pressure of the riders at the back now. Psychologically,
yeah,
they're really getting smashed.
But this looks to me as though it's Andreas Clear who's tapping out the rhythm on the front. Look at that crowd. What a magnificent sight.
Incredible. I don't think I've ever seen a crowd like this. It's probably helped by the fact that the weather is unbelievable. It's around about 20 degrees Celsius. That's the top of the Eichenberg. A nasty little right-hand corner. I've seen 1 or 2 crashes on that corner in the past, and one man who went down when he was in the leading group. In fact, the winning group a few years ago was young Joe Plancart, and he wasn't very happy about that.
Well, the car parked in the field, the riders coursing through the corridor of noise, and again they're still unconcerned by the breakaway, but the infighting is taking its toll now, because we're looking at just 40 seconds. It's yo-yoing still again. Once the hills are over, the riders tend to sit back and reassess the situation. But from what we've seen so far, Tom Bonen and Peter van Petegem are absolutely in control of this race at the moment. As an attack's gone off to the right by Francis de Gea. Here he comes.
Good little move this. Looks like Frédéric Guédon, surprise winner of Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago. But you know what? The interesting thing is to watch the way Peter van Petegem rides. He's psychologically playing with Tom Boone and saying, OK, boy, I'm still here. I might be the older man, but you've not got rid of me yet, and I have not really so far been put under any pressure at all.
Well, he certainly hasn't looked like he has.
No, he hasn't. He looks good. He wants to win this race. He certainly would love to win it for a 3rd time if he can. Put his name right up there alongside the big greats who've won it on 3 occasions. Fiorenzo Magni, Eric Le Mans, who was a great sprinter himself, and then, of course, Johan Museo.
The other man who comes from Brakel, apart from Peter van Petegem, by the way, is Robbie McEwen, the Australian. He lives there with his Belgian wife, Angelique, and they often train together, of course, because they're on the same Lotto team. Robbie, unfortunately, has had a little bout of sickness after a brilliant start to the season. He's won 7 races, I think it is, and he's sitting just down from us at the moment. Just giving advice, no doubt riding the course every inch of the way with Peter van Petegem. He will know his condition because he's no doubt been riding with him this week.
So Guédon, a man who, after winning Paris-Roubaix, really did battle around to get his place in the sport again. And this is the kind of move that would give FDJ some good publicity. But you can see the reaction coming behind. This is the next climb of the day. It's a climb called Boyenberg. It's a tarmac, smooth surface climb. Not that difficult for these riders as they set up for the next climb in about 7 kilometers time, known as the climb of Forest. And that too is a smooth surface climb before we get to the next very difficult climb of the day, the Steenberg, followed by the Leyberg.
Well, sooner or later they'll lasso the 3 leaders, and once they catch them, of course, it'll be everybody for himself, and the strong men will out. That's the way of the Tour de Flanders. It's a good name for a cyclist, Guédon, isn't it, really? Because it means handlebar in English.
It is in English, yeah. Frédéric Guédon. He's there, and this is actually rather an interesting move, because these riders are some of the lesser riders. Because there are so many of the big names in that leading group behind, they might allow a small group to get off the front of the group in a situation like this. And we'd sort of almost forgotten about the 3 leaders, but the main field won't have done, because they're now looking at just a 21-second advantage.
They must know where they are. Yeah, they must know where they are right now as we move on to the next climb of the day. 20 seconds the gap. Here we are, the Boyenberg. 57 kilometers to go and we get over the top of it. The sun high in the sky now, warming the backs of the riders. It's good to be a racing cyclist in the springtime when the sun comes out, and a massive crowd, as big as ever, if not bigger, watching the 89th running of the Tour de Flanders. In all, 256 kilometers. That's about 159 miles. Just half a mile shorter than last year. The riders won't notice that.
Just looking back there through the trees, it won't be long before we see the front end of the main field tickling its way through there, and they will be feeling very confident now, because they've done exactly what they needed to do. They've brought the prey almost back into the fold. I'm very impressed with the way Eric Zabel's riding here today on the left-hand side there in the pink jersey of T-Mobile. He certainly looks like a comfortable bike rider, and as you can see, Big Maggie Phil certainly does not like these steep inclines.
No. Maggie again losing ground, but just hang on there, Magnus, because once over the top, the boys need you. Although at 13 seconds, I don't think it's going to make much difference now.
Well, it shouldn't make much difference at all, and it'd be interesting to see just whether or not that group of 5 or 6 riders that was forming has managed to survive. I think we'll have status quo for a little while here, because many of these riders, I think, have done a lot of work in this section of racing since we came over the Old de Quaremont. And Maggie Baxter, I think, will look over his shoulders quite shortly and see the dark shadow of the main field starting to come up. But he's had a good test today. He's showed to the team that he's got good form for next week, and his defense of Paris-Roubaix.
Now you can see tactics are now beginning to play their part here. The riders aren't worried about the 3 leaders, but they've played some cards. They've fought the way back into the action from the rear. Now they're just waiting, holding position at the front, looking around, checking the opposition, knowing that we're getting down to where you play your final cards in your hand, if you've any cards left to play. 58 kilometers is hardly any distance at all to a professional cyclist, but it's the hills between now and the finish which are the big objects in their mind.
Still 8 climbs to go, and some very nasty climbs as well. The worst of them all is the Mur de Grammont, the Kapelmuur, the very difficult climb in the streets of Gerardsbergen, and that comes at 16 kilometers to go. You slope off that, and then you've got the Bosberg. But there's been a serious regrouping in this group, Phil. A lot of pink jerseys of T-Mobile. Obviously, Stefan Weseman is still in connection. We haven't been able to get right into the main field, and the reason is these roads are so narrow that the main field, the motorbikes can't get in amongst the riders to see just exactly who is present, which is why it's always surprising to see at the strategic points, all of a sudden Peter van Petegem pops to the front when he needs to.
Looks like his teammate Liam Van Bon setting the pace here at the moment. He's always a crafty rider as well, strong man, positioned himself well, and that good ally at this stage of the race for Van Petegem. Just keeping control of life. T-Mobile have ridden a good race today. Well, I suppose we should have expected that. They haven't won a race this year, which is amazing. And last year they did win this event, which was with Stefan Weseman. Here's Magnus Bagstedt, the big powerhouse. Take him off the hill, you see, and he canters back up to his breakaway companions. And lo and behold, we've gone out from 13 seconds to 43.
I think that's all because of the fact that those guys in the group behind, they know the race is over for these 3 men. They won't give up because they want to get as much publicity as possible out of this event now, but they must certainly realize there's absolutely no chance of winning the Tour of Flanders here this afternoon. But that, once again, is a big group forming at the back, and a lot of teams are still in with a lot of members here to try and set themselves up for something towards the end of the day. And again, it's Eric Zabel nipping off the front end of the main field.
Well, I'm not sure of his tactics. Otherwise, he might be saying, I'm feeling on a good day today. He's showing no respect for the up-and-coming reputations of the youngsters like Bonen, nor the old and outgoing reputations of Peter van Petegem, who seems to be riding very, very well indeed today. And the riders paying attention now to Zabel, jumping on him straight away, catching him. That's a big bunch, still in with a chance. And now we've got a lot of motorbikes back there and cars, indicating that this group is probably the selection group now.
Just on the back there is Jimmy Casper.
And that's a good ride for him.
Yeah. He normally doesn't like races like the Tour of Flanders. He's a sprinter, but he's a courageous bike rider for the Cofidis squad. And I think everyone's sitting up. That's Baldato fairly close to the front. This is a time when the riders are really starting to get quite tired. You see when a rider accelerates and looks over his shoulder to see if he's done any damage in the main field. That's an indicator that he feels as if his attack was strong enough to split the field, and psychologically it's quite tough when you look back and see, oops, I haven't got a gap.
There's an amazing number of motorbikes on the race this year. They're taking the moment to get away from the pack, but there's a puncture there, and that's a shame. That's a Rabobank rider. I can't quite make him out, Paul, but certainly not the top man, Decker, because he is... oh, it's Stephen de Jonge. It says longer on there, but Stefan de Jonge, who is having a flat tyre. He's a strong rider. You know, he's a man who could be a great outside win in this race.
He certainly could. He's a man who got a pretty quick tyre change there as well. He
was
quite lucky with that.
Very good.
You see how Eric Zabel has got himself right into the motorbikes. A nice, clever little move there by Zabel. A bit of confusion at the front. You can see the referee with the yellow armband there, just trying to force everybody to move out of the gap, joined there by Leon Van Bon. This is a good move here. Zabel today has decided to ride this race and not conserve energy at all for the final sprint of the day, and I had a feeling that looked like George Hincapie coming across.
Well, let's get another front shot. He could well be right there. Certainly Discovery, and certainly one of the tall boys. 43 seconds, starts to come down immediately. The race reacts. 42 seconds and counting. There's Van Bon. It might be Ekimov, in fact, yeah. It's Ekimov. So we've got 3 of them here now. 3 good, what should we call them, stayers now. I don't think we can call Zabel a great sprinter anymore.
Make it 5, because Stuart O'Grady's come across there as well. So
well, alarm bells will start now.
They certainly will. Now, that's a fairly good working group. All tough men have got into this group. Ekimov, never afraid to do a job of work at the front of a breakaway like this. Stuart O'Grady is a tough bike rider as well. And, of course, you throw in Eric Zabel, who was always going to try and succeed, because if he can reduce the numbers in this main field, he's got a very good chance of taking out the sprint.
Well, that group is well capable of riding away from any company in the world, but I've got a feeling that they won't give it a chance because people like Van Bon, Vyacheslav Ekimov, is a good move that by Ekimov. O'Grady, who placed in this race a couple of years ago, is on the podium, would love to win this. No Australian ever has. Phil Anderson finished second from memory on a couple of occasions in '85 and in '88. Another old hand up there, Martin Den Bakker, former champion of Holland. He must be getting quite old now.
He must be getting pretty old, but it just goes to show what was predicted before the start of this race. You have to be an older rider with a lot of experience to do well at moments like this, because psychologically this is a very difficult race, because you're accelerating, getting into a cobblestone section, going up a climb, then slowing down, then you've got to do it again and again and again. These guys will have to do this on 17 separate occasions, and it's only the men who have nerves of steel who can really keep doing that. But these guys, Phil, have actually got themselves quite a nice serious gap.
Well, the next climb is still about 4 kilometers to the summit. It's Forest. We went over it last year as well. Takes us to 206 kilometers on the day.
It's not that
You're
much
right.
Not a difficult climb. It's a nice smooth tarmac surface, and kicks right up in front of the riders along this ridge, which is a ridge that goes right the way from the old Quaremont just outside of Ronse, almost all the way to Ninova. And we zigzag along it all afternoon looking for the climbs, and such a repetitive nature. That looks like Rolf Aldag as well, who's made the junction there.
See, think about a race of this nature. Everybody's mentally attuned to the climbs, and they're thinking of the next one and the next one. And the riders who can break away in between sometimes are given a lead that cannot be reduced once the climbs come. A very difficult race to judge which break is going to be the winning break, of course. But you never know, and there's some good names in this move right now.
I think Eric Zabel has decided, rather than try to go with the winning break, he wants to make it, because he's the man who's launched the most number of these small counterattacks. Just around about hovering at the 30-second mark for the 3 leaders, but Maggie Baxter is looking less and less comfortable now, Phil, with the repetitive nature of these climbs. I think very shortly he'll be happy to see the reinforcements coming from the rear. But you look how bad these roads are. You have to be very alert. Not only in that group behind, you have to ride towards the front all of the time to make sure you're in a good position for the cobblestone sections, but even on just these normal roads you have to beware, because there's so much breakup on these little tracks.
Just watching Zabaya there look over his shoulder and check out if he could see the bunch, and he probably can actually, because it twists and turns so much. And still this group, plenty of fight in them now. They still can't wait to get to the next climb, which is just around the corner. And another attack launches off the front. Tom Bone and Peter van Petegem, they're involved in the internal battle here, not countering every move now. Looks like Rast, no, is that Dekker or Rast who's gone? Dekker has
right
gone,
in
second
there, very
place.
clever. And Roger Hammond tucked on the back. I don't think Hammond will do too much in this situation, because I think he's got other orders, and he's done a lot of work.
He's
in the
gritting
early
his
part.
teeth too.
He has to stay there. He wants to make sure that Discovery Channel have got some representation in this leading group, but there's a big reaction behind.
What youngsters have to realise when they're watching professional cycling at this level is that even the hardest of bike riders suffer like you never know to try and establish the move that can win them the race. And Hammond there doing his job. Zabel looking at him. All back together.
It's all back together once
Good
again.
to see Hammond made the split. It's actually the first time we've had confirmation he was up in this group.
Yeah, we've not
Big
noticed
Ralph
him.
again,
Yeah,
is it?
Aldag digging in. He's going to try and see if he can get himself a move off the front, and a nasty line across those cobblestones there. It's very precarious, and you have to be a top bike handler to stay upright in situations like this. But the gap down to the 30-second mark, and the only reason these guys, in fact, Phil, are surviving now is because in that group behind they're accelerating, then slowing down, and accelerate and slowing down. So generally it's giving the advantage to the 3 leaders. But you just look at the body language coming out of this group now. Maggie Baxter's shoulders are rounded. He keeps looking down at his gears to see what the situation is like, and it's an indication that he's almost blown.
Here comes Rolf. Looks over his shoulder. It's Magnus Burkhardt. Right, very like Aldag, but this is Burkhardt.
He's tried to come out of the front. That group with Decker back in the fold. Alongside him, Roger Hammond. I think Hammond pretty much in a defensive role, and again Maggie Baxter I think has decided to call it a day here. I don't think he wants to dig too much into his energy resources as we now look at the two leaders here on the slopes of this climb, Forest.
Oh, just looking at Burkhardt, Paul, first time he's been a pro. He's only 21, and it looks as though he's learning the ropes pretty quickly. So we're now onto the slopes of Forest, just reaching the 50 kilometres from the finishing point. Marcus Burkhardt here trying to liven up the chase from behind. They're having some difficulty in finishing off the three-man breakaway. They constantly they've been as close as 13 seconds. Now Zabaya has gone away, and this time he's got the better of Barredo and certainly Magnus Bagstead. They've just split this minute on the climb. I think they'll still come back together again. But Zabaya, he has ridden superbly today. This is the move. He decides to jump away. A last desperate effort, I think, in the dying throes of the breakaway.
Yep, big acceleration there. He just, in fact, accelerated away from the man who was with him, Barredo. Barredo won't give up, and it's a little bit deceptive here. It's such a nice day out on the roads of the Ronde van Vlaanderen, but that wind, I think, Phil, is starting to eat into the riders' energy levels, because this is turning out to be a pretty tough race. Although it's not nasty weather with wind and rain, I think that wind is actually just starting to really eat into the riders' levels.
It's almost as if the peloton now, having had the flurry of attacks and found they couldn't break the spirit of this group, they've now reached a little bit of a truce here, and it's going to be a huge showdown if we get to the Mur de Grammont in a group of this size. And it's T-Mobile who have been laying down the gauntlet. Earlier we had the infighting with the Lotto rider Van Petegem and the Quick Step rider Tom Bonen, and they all came back together. Now we've got another attack going off here.
Well, don't think it's going to be too much of an easy race on the run in towards the finish, because with 51 kilometres to go, we've still got 7 climbs to go before the end. And obviously the most difficult one of all is that one called the Mur de Grammont at around about 60 kilometres to go.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is how favourites lose bike races now, because this is Alessandro Ballan. He's another youngster here. He's only had one win, but he's on form, and they're going to do well to mark him.
Only one win, but in fact that was the first stage of the 3 days of La Panna, a race that he led right up until the final individual time trial. Look at that. Excuse me, I'm coming by. This is the difference between speed. He looks back there to see the shoulders of Marcus Burkhardt, and I think he said, come on, this is a good move. We've got a gap over the front end of the peloton, and we might just catch out a few of the top leaders here.
Well, Ballan has joined there. Ballan turned professional last year, and as far as I know, Marcus Burkhardt has only just turned pro for T-Mobile. He's 21 years of age, and he's just been caught by Ballan, and they're going to get on with the job in hand. Zabaya now on his own, and I would never have predicted this.
Kop van der Wegstrijd, that's confirmation. This is the front of the race, just jiggling his thighs a little bit. That's just to loosen them up, try and get a little bit of that excess lactic acid out of them before he sets himself up for the next climb of the day. Here's Maggie Baxter. He's been picked up by the two chasers, so the race situation is Zabaya, who is being followed by Barredo on the road, and now this three-man group. But the main field is still only hovering at 30 seconds in arrears.
There's the chase group confirmed. Up the road are two riders, and just over the back shoulder we're going to see that big group containing indeed George Hincapie, Roger Hammond, predominantly from Discovery, and of course the other favourites like Stuart O'Grady from Australia, Van Petegem, Tom Bonen, Eric Zabel. They're the ones we know of. Unfortunately, we only know what we can tell you because we don't have the luxury of race radio today, and those are the remaining climbs still to come. Noch means to go. Encore, and the next one to be challenged will be the top one, Steenberg, followed by the Leberg, the Berendries, Valkenburg, Ten Bos, Muir, and finally the Bosberg.
Well, if you see that helicopter up at the top there, that's an indicator where the rest of the race is, and that's why it's so very difficult in these big top professional races to actually surprise people too much, because there's so much media around that you can actually pretty much work out where everybody else is in the race because of the media attention that they're getting. But those two riders, Phil, have got themselves a pretty serious gap over the front end of the peloton. I think the peloton have decided just to call a truce for a fraction, but somebody else has decided to launch another interesting counter move.
So one man remains at the head on his own. Now here comes the drive, and Stuart O'Grady has got into this one. So too Roger Hammond. So the group's still clear. Zabel, one rider coming across the gap. Looks like it might be CSC. But the field aren't very far behind. But they're going to have to chase this one down, I think. And it's going to hurt them for the next climb coming up.
It's going to hurt them a lot for the next climb coming up. Just looking down here, there's George Hincapie going through. So Hincapie's still in this group. It's good to see Hincapie has actually ridden a very sensible race so far. He's always been there and thereabouts in the event, but he hasn't actually used too much energy. And I wonder if he's just holding back, and his race tactic this afternoon is going to be banking on doing something special on the Muur de Grammont. This is the Steenberg. As you can see, it's just 48 kilometers to go. And this is the counter-attack here. Maggie Backstead, I would think, would be quite happy. They've pulled up there, Barredo. So the race situation is Constantino Zabaya on his own, followed at 23 seconds by these four chasers, and then a very interesting group at a further 20 seconds down. And I'd like to go back there and just get a little check on exactly who is in that group. Zabel was definitely there. Zabel has definitely got himself in position this afternoon, Phil, to try and do a ride.
Yes, nice tempo riding here by Ballan, but look, just, oh dear me, poor old Maggie's just gone. Legs have said enough is enough. I don't think he'll finish the race now. Looking now at the riders here as they battle away along here on the Steenberg climb. 15 seconds is to the chasing group, I presume now, which contains Stuart O'Grady and Eric Zabel. This is the main field just behind that group, and we're looking at riders at the moment spread all over the climb. This is Alessandro Ballan, who has proved to be a pretty much of a powerhouse as he's trying to reach the leader on his own.
That's a good move by him. He's got himself halfway across the gap. He will feel very confident after his win just less than a week ago on the first stage of the 3 days of La Panna. In fact, rocked up by finishing second in the overall standings as well. He only lost that in the final day's time trial, which was taken out by Jatislav Ekimov. But the overall win went to the Discovery Channel rider Stijn de Volder, who was a bit of a find, I think, for Discovery Channel. Now you can see the white flag is up once again. A little bit of a truce before we start to get back down to the art of climbing.
And the flags of Flanders flying. Jimmy Casper still sat at the back here, the sprinter. And poor old Luke Roberts there, covered in mud. So we'll see whether those mud baths work now, because he's pretty good looking to start with. But he really did have a nasty tumble along with a couple of other guys into what appears to have been a very muddy ditch indeed. He did well to get into this group. He's done some good riding back there to be in this selection.
Psychologically, if you're up for a race like this, and a little incident like that's not going to knock out the stuffing. And Luke Roberts, we've known him for quite a long time. He's a tough bike rider, and he's a kind of man who seriously wants to make the change from being a top track rider into a top road rider, very much like the man who has led the way in changing from being one of the top track cyclists in the world to being a good road rider, and that's Stuart O'Grady.
Well, here's a good quiz question. When was the last time a Spanish rider led the Tour de Flanders at this stage of the day? As Zabaya now tries desperately to survive. He can't possibly stay away, but you never know. And if Ballan gets up to him, that'll make an interesting tandem. But there's the gap, 8 seconds, and the group is nearly on there now as they swing around.
Still the same old elastic. Accelerate, slow down, see what damage has been done, and take a look back over your shoulder to see the state of affairs, and then just go again and again. And shortly, I'm quite confident we're going to actually see a breakaway start to form here, because there's been so many attacks. And sorry about that, but we're trying to bring all of the action. Looking a bit further back, you can see this man Ballan is getting himself across the gap, and very shortly he will join up there with Constantino Zabaya. But looking down the field there, Phil, that looked a lot more than 10 or 15 seconds to me.
It did. I wasn't sure whether they were tucked in off the camera lens there, but we'll find out. This is a fine piece of cycling. Lamprey will be delighted with this. The times they've come to this race and gone away with nothing, but now they've got a man in the front. Ballan joins now at 47 kilometers to go, the top of the Steenberg, and we've got two riders in the lead.
Next climb up in a few kilometers time is going to be the Leiberg. That's around about 4 kilometers from here. A lot of pressure on this group now, Phil. It's always been in a big long line with riders, I think, starting to set themselves up. They can feel that the Muur de Grammont is on the horizon. At the back of my mind, I'm really starting to think that the youngster Tom Boonen, with 24 wins to his credit last year, has got just a little bit too much pressure on his young shoulders in a race like this, and maybe spent just a little bit too much time at the front.
Well, some nice pacemaking here. Bram Tankink is the man doing it for Quick Step. Another sacrificial lamb. All he's got to do is keep this pace high and keep Tom Boonen in with a chance. Then he can go home happy and take a share of the prize money with him.
They've got Filippo Pozzato in their midst as well. And
well,
he's a man that a lot of people have tipped for an outside win at the start this morning. And maybe they've put a lot of pressure onto the shoulders of Tom Boonen with the fact that they're going to use Pozzato as a wild card down towards the end.
Most interesting move, and look, we're out to nearly a minute now with the extra firepower arriving up alongside Zabaya. We've got Balan up there now. The gap has gone out again. You never give up, because these boys firmly believe the winner is still here, and that's all they're interested in. These are the two leaders, the Hares and the Hounds now, as Balan and Zabaya at the back, now prepared to take a rest behind a fresh pair of wheels that's joined him. Pushing it out just on the minute, a mere 45 kilometres, 28 miles to the finish. But unfortunately for all these riders, we've got 6 serious climbs still to come, and then a final 12-kilometre dash for home.
And throw in a bit of extra cobblestones as well. Casea, 2.3 kilometres. This is Haaghoek. And this man, Balan, certainly is one of those rare Italian riders who I think is excelling in Belgium. Men like in the past, Franco Ballerini, Andrea Taffer, they've always loved to come up here and ride a race like this.
That's right, and Moreno Argentine, of course, another great Italian cyclist. Used to train in South Africa and come back and batter everybody over the cobblestones here in Belgium.
Slowing down again. St. Cornelis Horbeck. These names are all names that will be very familiar to one Pieter van Pietegem, who will be thinking about just where and when he's going to launch his move. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a little move coming from Van Pietegem around about the climb of Berendries, because that is just outside his backyard and just on the outskirts of the little town of Brakel where he lives.
Well, Quick Step have done everything right so far. They've advertised to the world they are a team to be beaten here. They've had the men on the front all the time. Tankink riding very, very strongly on front. Boonen is the third rider here. And those cobblestones, just look at the chains bobbing and bouncing. And Zabaya expecting the peloton to arrive pretty soon, but in fact he may not realize he's gone out from about 8 seconds to 51 right now. Another kilometre is ticked off as well.
Balan looking very strong and comfortable there, Phil. And look at this. This is a big work being done on the front here by Quick Step. Nico Martin is in the group just over to the left-hand side. He, I think, will be thinking about what he can do for Pieter van Pietegem, who has ridden a perfect race so far. And Roger Hammond is starting to look pretty good there in around about 10th position. And even though he worked hard in the early part of this race for George Hincapie, he might be given a free ticket, because after all, he finished third in Paris-Roubaix last year.
He's riding very well. He's always been a man from Belgium. MrBookmaker.com were very sad to lose Hammond to the Discovery Channel. Obviously they wished him well, because they couldn't prevent him going to such a team of that quality, but they really didn't want to lose him. He's been the #1 choice on the team for a few years now. He speaks absolutely fluently the Flemish language. He loves this place, and the Belgians love him. They would see it as half a Belgian victory if indeed Hammond did win here.
Well, let's just have a look. That's the small group off the front there.
It's all over. This time, surely it's all over.
It's the group containing Maggie Backstead, Burkhardt, and of course Barredo. They're the 3 riders who were caught in the middle. But the 2 lone leaders have a 40-second advantage over the peloton, which every time it accelerates, Phil, really starts to get reduced in numbers.
Well, earlier we saw an 8-second gap, and I suspect it was the gap between the 2 groups of 3. It wasn't made absolutely clear, rather than the peloton, who have always been around about what they are now, I suspect. But they're still rethinking their next move. Rest assured, when we get up to the next climb, the Leberg, we might see some more shows of strength from the young bucks of the pack. A lot of young riders out to establish they are now part of this new peloton in the year 2005. This is the catch now. That's Marcus Burkhardt. He's one of those new youngsters coming into the scene. First time we've ever mentioned his name in cycling, and he's chosen a good race to get in front of the television cameras. Today maybe won't be his day, but what of the future?
These are the 2 leaders, though, and Constantino Zabaya must have been thinking a few moments ago, well, it's all over for me. I'm about to get caught, and now he's just received a rejuvenation, because he's been joined here by Balan on the front.
So we're coming to the top of the Leberg right now. 42 kilometres to go. There are just a handful of chasers, and the peloton are now closing the field down. 35 seconds at the spread. This is the capture now primarily of Magnus Bagstedt and Buchholz, who's leading here, and the other early breakaway in Beredo. They're about to be wiped by that group containing Bonham, Pete Van Petegem, and George Hincapie and Roger Hammond. They are in that group for sure. No Lance Armstrong is there, I'm afraid. He's just seen the men he expects to ride well get to the front on his team. And now is going to be a reshape here on the Leberg, leaving just two riders out front, Zabaya and the man who caught him, Balan.
Well, it's all back together in the no man's land. There's still two leaders off the front end of the group, and looking back there, Constantino Zabaya is not worried at all of going to the front and doing his share of the pacemaking, but Balan is riding very well, Phil, after that performance in the 3 days of La Panna. That was a serious indication that he had good form, and he looks good on the bike as well. He looks very comfortable. He's not indicating any signs of fatigue, but I think the main field that little bit more serious now as they go up the Leberg, because all of these guys know that once they've gone over the Leberg, they'll drop into Brakel, and then it's over the Berendries. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a vicious attack coming from Peter Van Petegem, very much in the style of Johan Museo of old.
It's got to come soon. There is now all of a sudden a very tense atmosphere in the Tour of Flanders this year. Nobody wants to move up and set the pace right now, because they know rearing ahead of them is Valkenburg, Ten Bosch, the Muir and the Bosberg. And that could be it. The Valkenburg climb, by the way, hasn't been in the Tour of Flanders since 1996.
Don't discount Lance Armstrong,
is
because
that
in
there?
about 15th place there is Armstrong riding pretty much to the front end of the group. And one or two of his teammates, Phil, said before the start, don't discount Lance in a race like this.
I take my hat off, Paul. We scanned this peloton time and time again, and we didn't see him, but there he seems to be now, riding midway down. And looking at that, Paul, I think Discovery have about 5 riders here.
And they've ridden sensibly. They've always been in the splits of this group without having to do too much work on the front end of the main field. So too is Eric Zabel there in the pink jersey. He's also been very attentive. That gap of Balan and Zabaya stretched out to 46 seconds, but if you just caught a glimpse there, that was the outskirts of Brakel just in the distance, and that indicates that the next big climb of the day is going to come up quite shortly, and that's the climb of the Berendries.
Well, we've done the Steinberg climb as we now head up to kilometre 41 to go.
Frédéric Guédon of FDJ.com in the white jersey on the front here. He too has started to ride quite well, and he's another rider who must be in excess of 30 years of age. He won Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago, a major surprise, sat on the back of the group. Nobody really paid very much attention to him, but in the sprint he got it all right and got himself the win. Now Ekimov is on the front of the group there, doing the work to pull this back for Discovery Channel. And the fact that they've got a lot of riders present down towards the end is an indication here that they're feeling quite confident. And Hincapie has always complained a little bit in the past because he hasn't had too many teammates around him. And this occasion,
he can't complain today. No, he can't, because they're all there now. And they've got a lot of cards they can play here. They're watching the inter-rivalry between the Belgian cyclists and T-Mobile, quite clearly desperate to get a victory and wipe away the wreckage of the start of the 2005 season. Haven't won a race to this moment, and they can profit from all of these other team tactics right now. If the captain is there, Armstrong, and we do believe he is, he'll be back up to chase them all along very soon. Obviously there was a regrouping a little while back now, and Lance has come up in that group.
Once again slowing down as they take a little look at the situation to see just exactly what is happening. The situation is this: 2 leaders at 39 kilometers to go. Balan on the front there for Team Lampre, Zabaya on the back for Sonier Duval and for Spain, and he's a member of that early morning breakaway, and his legs right now must be screaming out for
shaking
surrender.
Him, in fact. Yeah.
He's just trying to get that little excess of lactic acid out there, just to try and make himself feel that little bit more comfortable.
It's an outstanding piece of riding, though.
Great work by him, and this man has certainly started the season off well, as you said earlier, 3rd overall in Paris-Nice. He's not got a bad little sprint when it comes down to the end of races like this, but I somehow don't think he's going to survive here on the final few kilometers of the Tour of Flanders. 39 kilometers to go, 25 miles of racing, and they should cover that inside of 1 hour.
Just about, but they've got to take into account the severe climb of the Muir de Grammont. This is the man of the moment, Balan. Make a note of his name. I think he's going to be around for a long time, this youngster. He's 25 years of age, but only just. And Zabaya, I think he's getting tired, but he's not going to give up. The man in the golden boots is now riding here, second wheel at the moment, as we head to Berendries. Inside that magic 40 kilometers to go now. Just about an hour of racing.
Berendries, nice smooth surface climb. And Balin has got to really settle in and do most of the pacemaking in this group. And this is the climb where a couple of years ago Johan Museeuw attacked, and nobody expected someone to attack that far from the finish. The mood had come into the group on that occasion that there was going to be a major sort out on the Mur de Grammont, but Museeuw didn't want to wait that long. Anyway, crowd here again turning out in magnificent style. I think this might be the end for Zabaya, Phil.
Well, let's hope not, but he certainly can't handle this man now. Balin on the climbs, who's got fresher legs, of course. As we look here now toward the top of the Berendries, it looks like an attack by Balin, who's gone clear here of Zabaya, the hero of the day, the last of the 6 breakaways to wave farewell to the front of the Tour of Flanders, with the field 41 seconds back. Alessandro Balin, make a note of his name. He finished second in the recent 3 days of De Panne, where he won a stage as well. And it's just down the road from where we're racing today, that event. This is life in the peloton, and now they're getting a little bit twitchy. 39 seconds is all the gap is, and Discovery have a lot of firepower back there. We estimate possibly 5 riders in that group from Discovery Channel.
Difficult moves here. Everybody is starting to get very nervous, waiting for the moves, wanting to be present in the moves, but wanting to hold back that little bit of energy for the big final push over the Mur de Grammont, where you have to have all of your capabilities in your legs when you get to that climb of the day. You can just see, looking over here, one of the riders from Liquigas has decided, well, that's it. Bar the shouting, I might as well go back into the main field because I don't have the legs to stay with that young man who's attacked from Rabobank.
33 seconds. That gap seems to have been stuck there. But look at this now. There is the man in the passive face, wearing the armbands of a world champion. Lance Armstrong is just warning them what might come in July. Just get a feel of his back wheel now. He's come back into this race from the second group somehow, but right now he is doing this for George Hincapie. Look at the face of Ekimov, third wheel. Hincapie is in there, but staying in the comfort of the peloton.
Well, that's answered any doubts that anybody had after his 144th place in the prologue of Paris-Nice. Lance Armstrong is back, getting himself nice and comfortable, getting himself ready for the showdown, and he's got a lot of teammates around him. Yaroslav Ekimov is there, and a little bit further back, George Hincapie will be there, and I would think Hincapie, Phil, will be waiting for the Mur de Grammont. But Armstrong looking very good and decided after a 24th place just a couple of days ago in Paris-Camembert.
It's just pure class when it comes to bike riding, this man. And Balin here will not know what's going on behind, neither will he care. He's put his cards firmly on the table for Lamprey, and he's going to try and do something about this in the Tour of Flanders today. It's all up to him now. This is a crash here. We just picked it up. This is Cañada, I think, who's gone down.
I don't know how that happened.
No, it might have been a bike change, actually. I'm not sure whether he fall or just threw his bike down.
Well, it's just after the right-hand turn at the top of Berendries, so he probably did drop it.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, he fell. Here we go.
Just at the back end of the group. And
he just lost it, yeah.
He just dropped it going
probably
around
hit
that
a
corner.
Patch of dust or something. Ouch.
Yeah, well, he's going to have to hope that the team car is not too far behind. Now they're dropping off the top of Berendries. They drop down into the outskirts of Brakel, into the small town of Neder-Brakel. Then they will face themselves up to the Valkenburg, and then it's the Ten Bosch, which comes at around about 26 kilometers to go. And this is the time, I think, Phil, in between these two climbs when Balin has to try and build up himself a fairly sensible advantage if he wants to get to the bottom of the Mur de Grammont with a 40 or 50 second advantage.
Well, this would be a win of the proportions of a Johan Museeuw if he were to stay away. This is Karsten Kroon, they are telling us, from Rabobank, a good climber, gets the odd result. Very strong Rabobank rider, perfect team man. But we wouldn't expect him to be winning the Tour of Flanders today. I think the winner still will be coming from that big field behind. But just thinking of Balin, Paul, he's got himself that lead, which he keeps up there. It's pushing back up to a minute.
Pushing back up to very close onto a minute. He'll start to feel just that little bit more confidence. But there's a lot of big names in this group, Phil, and a lot of big chasing still to do. Armstrong looking very comfortable there, looking over his shoulders. He's probably looking for the whereabouts of George Hincapie. We'll have a word with Hincapie in a few moments' time. Chatting back with the team management. There is Yaroslav Ekimov sitting in the middle. This is the most riders that this team, I think, has had together at one time in an event like this. And that's one thing that George Hincapie said before the start. I need to have a lot of teammates around me if I'm going to get the win on this occasion.
Well, just looking at the work being done here now, it's becoming a battle of the big teams here. T-Mobile, Quick Step, Discovery Channel. Trying to just keep an eye on things is the single lotto rider Peter van Petergem. Liam van Bon should be in there somewhere, but they haven't got big numbers there. So Van Petergem will look to profit now from the team tactics of the big squads. This rider isn't waiting to find out. He's made his bid for home and he's hoping it'll be the result, and it would be a great result if it happened.
Karsten Kroon back in the main field. I think that was
a good decision,
move.
I think.
Absolutely. You can get caught sometimes because of your enthusiasm in a situation like that, halfway across a gap, and you use just so much energy, and that's not good for the team, because down towards the end of the race, a man like Eric Decker might need a wheel or a little bit of assistance from a teammate like Karsten Kroon. But this is the leader, Alessandro Ballan, a lonely figure, and again Eric Zabel.
Unbelievable. Well, the last to challenge to win the race was Andrea Taffy in 2002. And as we're looking now, Zabel he's got ants in his pants today, because he just keeps on jumping away and seeing who will come and join him. Now we've got Fassa Bortolo. This is a Petito, I think, yes, as he tries to reach him. He's another man who is, I think, underperformed over the years, because he should have won a lot more races than he has, and Zabel's quite happy to work with him.
Zabel looking very punchy. This man is always in form, but as he said himself, he doesn't quite have that explosive kick at the end of a race to beat men like Alessandro Petacchi or, of course, Oscar Freire. But there are no big sprinters in this group here this afternoon, so he's decided to ride a different style of race as Eric Zabel. He's looking for the move, looking for the break, and if he comes to the finish in a small group of 5 or 6 riders, I don't think there's many people going to beat him.
Well, but how much money is he giving away, how much effort rather is he giving away in the sprint here? Heading towards the climb of Valkenburg. We haven't been this part of the route for 10 years, and we'll see. But he's got his minute, or I didn't even have time to say it before it fell back to 58 seconds. But the counter-attack from the peloton immediately has been jumped on. We've still got Zabel and Petito up front, and we've still got the lone leader too of Ballan, who's riding superbly into the little back streets now of this town.
This is all around about Brakel, Neder Brakel, the small towns which are very much the center of many of the bike races. They're just about to pick up Constantino Zabaya.
Yep.
But they're still hovering on a very big gap over Alessandro Ballan, who's really nudging it very close to that 1 minute mark. And if he can get to the bottom of the Mur de Grammont with a minute, he's got a very good chance, Phil, of causing a great big surprise. But there's too many names in the group behind.
Well, that's what one would think, but then they're not going to possibly see this man as a threat, and that could be their next mistake. 57 seconds is the gap, just a shade over 20 miles from the finishing line here in Ninove, Meerbeke. And still no decision in the Tour de Flanders. This is turning out to be quite a scrap today, and it's going to be a big battle for the final honours. Here's the man who's trying to shape a new regime for Italy. No winner since Taffy in 2002, and Ballan is riding up very strongly. We're looking down on the long thin line of what is still a very large bunch here in the Tour de Flanders. A couple are up the road. Ballan is still in the lead, 54 seconds the spread, and those 3 riders down there just picked up Constantino Zabaya, who was in the early morning breakaway, and that is Zabel and Roberto Petito, and that is all the people who are left in the Tour de Flanders.
False tempo on the front, I would hope, being set there by T-Mobile. Now this man, for the first time, Phil, looks like he is beginning to suffer, rocking his body a bit, trying to find the strength and the added weight to go down with the thighs to tick that gear over as he makes himself suffer to get to the summit of the Valkenburg. But he's still, once he's gone over this climb, got 3 more climbs to go, and the next 2 are very difficult. The Tin Boss is a hard climb. It's a steep, smooth surface climb, and then he's got to be thinking in the back of his mind, I've still got to do this over the Mur de Grammont.
This is why you love the Belgian fans, because they do cheer everybody in the bike race. They love a winner, but they'll cheer the man who goes over the line in last place with the same enthusiasm. It's a sport that they love, and this is another one he can tick off now as he gets towards the top of the Valkenburg, leaving him just about 20 miles to go to the finish.
You could almost feel the relief coming out of his body once the road had leveled out and started to become flat again, and he's changed the gears, started to roll over the massive gears again to pick himself up to an average speed of around about 45 kilometers an hour. The flags are ripping across here now. There's another move coming here from T-Mobile. Now this is a bit of a surprise because Erik Zabel is in front, and I'm not quite sure who that T-Mobile rider is who's moving. Dekker hasn't got it there. He couldn't stay on the wheel. He's gone back, but that's Tom Boonen, the youngster, 24 years
guess who's
of age.
Behind him? Oh, that's a Rabobank. I thought it was in fact Lotto.
It is Van Petegem.
I thought it was. So he's just marking Boonen. He's convinced Boonen is the man to beat in this race.
Weseman. Stefan Weseman has seen this as a great possibility. Van Petegem moved up there. He's at home right now, Phil. He knows all of these roads. Boonen is with him as well.
Well, that's the top three boys.
There's Zabel.
And really, Discovery Channel have got to chase this down straight away. They mustn't allow a gap to open, otherwise they'll ride away from them. Because this is a superb group now as they get together at the front. 5 riders here. Ballan still out on front, of course. Stefan Westerman was very laconic at the start this morning. Bit philosophical, but said his form was good. He loved the thought he had #1 on his bike. Look at Boonen realising what he's got, and Van Petegem will work with him now. This is Van Petegem coming through. This is an important move now. This reduces all the race favourites if they can go clear.
Not only is Van Petegem tough physically, but he's tough mentally in a situation like this. He's seen the damage done. He realises now he's inside of 32 kilometres to go. 2 riders here in this group from T-Mobile must certainly come to the front, but hats off to Erik Zabel. He's the man
brilliant.
Who's been looking for this move all afternoon.
But look at the face of Boonen. Boonen is very pained there. He really is hurting. I'm not sure he's feeling as good as he was an hour ago. But Petito sits at the back, doesn't want to help anymore. And I do believe there is a counter move from the peloton. It could well be coming back.
Somebody's halfway across the gap there. You can just see that rider at around about 50 metres. But it is so difficult at the end of a long race like this to close down that gap finally. And looking back, they do seem to have opened up a pretty serious gap over the main field, which again has been reduced in numbers quite dramatically by that climb there, the Valkenberg. Be setting themselves up now for the 10 Boss, and that is where Peter Van Petegem, I think, will start to feel comfortable. He's just almost at home, about a kilometre away from his hometown.
Looking down at the group there, the face of Erik Zabel, but Westerman is with him now. That was a deliberate plan to join Erik. The 2 top men on T-Mobile are right there. Those boys are a lot braver than me, I can tell you, Paul, but there's a tribute to Brakel. The town that hosts, and the man who lives in there is Peter Van Petegem, and indeed Robin McEwen. This is the group now, and Van Petegem is seeing his chance. Petito's having a bit of a struggle there. Well, that's a fine piece of artwork, I must say, but their brave souls are putting it up.
And the reason is they're actually celebrating the fact that this year Brakel has been nominated the town of the Tour of Flanders. Every year they choose a town to be nominated as the town, and this year, quite fittingly, I think it's Brakel, because nearly every bike race I ever took part in went through Brakel one way or the other.
Van Petegem can't lose, really, can he? He's got to win to make the fairy tale come true. Time to take on and grab a drink there, which they all seem to have done with some efficiency. Not easy to do when you're under pressure like this with an attack going on. There's the group, and I would suspect that it should be Discovery Channel driving now at the front of that group.
Ooh, the gaps, the pain, everyone is really under pressure now as we tickle inside of 18 miles to go to the finish, 27 seconds. That group didn't give it full firepower, I think, and we may well see a recuperation here of 1 or 2 riders and favourites in this group behind. But look at the gaps between all of those riders' wheels. They are all gasping for breath, just hoping to stay in contact with the wheel in front of them.
There are 20 riders in that chasing group, 2 ahead of them, making 22. This handful of riders here, which are numbering 5, that's 27, plus the leader 28. They are the only men left in now with a chance of victory.
Van Petegem looks hard there, doesn't he, as he comes up. It's a big push coming from T-Mobile here. Tom Boonen has been at the front so much, but it looks to me as if he's made himself the gap here. Zabel must be feeling very comfortable and happy with his position. And in fact, that's Andreas Clear, the other rider in there from T-Mobile. I just caught a glimpse there of the bandage on his left arm. He was involved in a crash just a couple of days ago, but you can see the dedication to duty here of Erik Zabel. He really is on fire, and if you give a trophy for the man of the match, I'd like to give it to Erik.
Well, he certainly has been the attacker of the day. There's no question about that, and if he's rewarded with a high finish, then hats off. It takes a very strong man to do that. But these are the big races now. This is when the big men come to their real form, when they apply themselves to the limit. It certainly isn't over yet, though. Just around the corner, that looks like the lone leader They're saying 25 seconds. That might be the spread. No, second group at 25, a little bit less, I think.
It's not 25 seconds.
But
to
that
Eric
is Ballan
Zabel,
for sure.
That's Ballan, the lone leader, and although he was looking very comfortable a couple of kilometers ago, he certainly seems to have lost his impetus, and that is certainly not 25 seconds. This group now coming across of 5 riders, and they've got themselves a pretty serious gap over the front end of the main field. Peter van Petegem must be feeling very confident with a move like this, because he's in with 2 riders from T-Mobile, and they will ride their hearts out, because before the start of this race, Andreas Clear, their number 3, was one of the pre-race favourites. And if it comes down to a sprint from a group of 5 or 6 riders, I wouldn't want to put money against Eric Zabel.
Well, that's making sure the riders go the right way around the roundabout, put the crowd in the way, but right around they go. We now have 6 riders in the lead at 29 kilometers from the finish, and Ballan is going to find the strength, I hope, to sit on the back at least for a moment. 2 riders from T-Mobile are here, and it's Andreas Clear, not Stefan Wesserman, who's made the move up, and good for him. He's on form, and it's a very strong move with Zabel sitting in, Van Petegem and Tom Bonen, the 2 top Belgian favourites.
Armstrong on the front. He realises how dangerous that move is. He knows that if George Hincapie wants to win this race now, he's got to pull it all back together. Hincapie there in about 6th place. This
is when your team leader becomes the chief domestique, and Armstrong is now a helper in this race, which he always said he would be, and now he's going to give it his best shot to pull Hincapie, Hammond back into the group. It's going to be a tough call. It's only 23 seconds. He's got to do it now or never.
It's going to be very tough and nasty in that main group when they come up to the slopes of the Ten Bos. We're now in the streets of Brakel again, and Peter van Petegem knows this road very well. He must train on it almost every other day of his life. He's known it since he was a young bike rider. He was a Belgian national champion with the amateurs, and now he's thinking about the possibility of writing himself into the history books by winning the Tour of Flanders for a 3rd time. But at 24 seconds, Phil, I think it's going to be really mean going up in the main field, because if Lance Armstrong goes uphill the way he does in the Tour de France, ouch.
We'll all suffer, even the commentators. Ten Bos is the next object of the day. It's about a kilometre to the top. It's going to hit us as we leave the town here. These are the new pacemakers now, and they're all strong. Ballan rightly sitting at the back. He deserves to. Meanwhile, at the front, Lance Armstrong, the Tour de France champion, now showing what a strong man he is. Just look at these pictures here now at 27 kilometers to go. Lance Armstrong hits the front of this group in an effort now, a desperate effort to drag George Hincapie back into this race. 6 riders lead: Clear, Van Petegem, Zabel, Boenen, Petito and Ballan as we start the climb at Ten Bos. It's only 450 meters, but it hurts, and it might well shed Ballan at the back here.
And the man doing the pacemaking at the front on home turf there is Peter van Petegem, right on the front with Clear, Zabel, Petito's up there, Ballan, and of course Tom Boenen. But behind, the job of work that Lance Armstrong is doing is absolutely remarkable. I can only say one thing, Phil, right now. I hope Jan Ullrich's not watching.
Well, indeed, but indeed too, the Belgians have put their top 2 men in this breakaway by sheer effort at the right time. This is going to be a terrific race. I'm not sure why we're getting this counter-attack here from Ivanov, who's on the T-Mobile squad with 2 men in the lead. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but George Hincapie in 3rd place will be saying thanks very much.
Well, I'm really not sure about that at all. You've got 2 men in a leading group of 6 riders. That is very strange. I think Armstrong has done his job for the day and said, OK, George, take over now. I want you to win this race. I've pulled it all back. Now you have to act as a man. Now you've got to show that you're the leader of this team in the one-day classics. And there he is, right on the wheel of Sergei Ivanov, 19 seconds. If you've got it, George, go for it now.
Well, I would probably shoot Ivanov if I was in the T-Mobile team right now, because he started a move that's taken George Hincapie up to them, but that's their problem. George will be very happy as they now know they must reach that group. 18 seconds. They're closing in on the leaders. Clear, Van Petegem, Zabel, Boenen, Petito. Ballan has ridden well to hold on to this group because he was the lone leader, and he's hung on to the back. I think he's a rider of absolute class we're going to see an awful lot of in the next couple of years. He's still very young.
26 kilometers to go to the finish. That's around about 10 kilometers to go to the top of the Mur de Grammont. There's a little bit of flatland here in between these two climbs, and these riders will look over their shoulders. It's up to T-Mobile, who have got the majority of riders present, to do most of the work on the front end of the group. Hincapie now coming across the gap. They've really put pressure on this main field, but they haven't actually split it. They've been put onto a defending role of Discovery Channel here, but George Hincapie knows he wants to get this win if he can. He hasn't had to do very much of an effort since the early part of the race. Now he has to pay.
He's got to do it now. He's running out of teammates. He's only got one left, in fact, and he's done his bit. And looks though Rolf Aldag is still there, but unlike Ivanov, he's not helping at all. But he's just jumped onto the Express. 20 seconds the gap. It's edging closer. But they've got to shut it down, because the next hill we reach is the dreaded Mur de Grammont. And if they're not on by then, I think we'll see Van Petegem and Boonen try to go for gold.
That's what they'll try and do if they can, but you know, I think the two boys from Discovery on the front end of this group are really going to pull themselves inside out. But it's only hovering at the 20-second mark, and everyone's looking over their shoulders. Everyone's worried. That's Mark Lotz on the back there for Team Quick-Step. He's not going to contribute to the pacemaking at all, because he knows he's got his man in the leading group of 6 in the shape of Tom Boonen. But what a great bike rider there, number 2 on the back there, Rolf Aldag. He did a lot of work early on, and he's still present and defending for his team, T-Mobile. 7 kilometers to the bottom of the climb of the Mur, 16 kilometers to the top.
They've got to get up and sort it now. Petito here is still in the group. I'm not sure how well he's going. He's asked for a bottle to go up towards Balan, I think. Yes, he has. That was very nice of him, as they're on rival teams. So I think they're both struggling a little bit here. They're catching on to the back wheel of 4 really good bike riders right now, 2 from the same team. I presume by the effort that Ivanov just made to try and catch them, he's looking for a different team next season, because he might well find he's getting one. Can't think why he tried to start a counter move against these 2 riders.
I can't understand at all why he did that. Maybe he wasn't watching TV like we are and realized that he'd got 2 men in a leading group of 6. This is a very strong position for T-Mobile to be in. Eric Zabel, despite the number of attacks he's thrown in today, he really still does look very comfortable. Balen paying a little bit for his efforts. As you can see, Petito on the back as well. Still, Phil, the gap is actually starting to climb up to 28 seconds. It may well be that Lance Armstrong pulled out just a little bit too early there, because George Hincapie and the rest of his team certainly haven't been able to pull that back. And the difficult situation they find themselves in is that there are a lot of the big teams represented in that group. On the left, you can see the Kop van de Wegstrijd, the race lead, and on the right, the Achtervolgers, the following group. And I tell you what, it's going to be a long, hard chase for Hincapie.
It is. Eric Zabel has won almost 200 races as a professional, but you know, he would give anything now to win this one, because it would prove to him that he's still big time. Right of the picture there was a very good ride being done there by Fassa Bortolo's Fletcher. Another Spanish rider having a great ride in the hills of Flanders today. There's the select group of leaders led by Andreas Clear, Peter Van Petegem, Eric Zabel, Tom Boonen, Roberto Petito and Balan, the man who started it all. And what has he started now? They're about 6 kilometers from the big climb itself.
Oh, it's starting
30 seconds. It's looking bad for George Hincapie. They've got to get round at the moment. Yes, the Ronde van Vlaanderen is a monument of the sport, and long may it remain so, because it's the most popular race, I think, on the cycling calendar.
Certainly is in Belgium, and it certainly is in Flanders as well. This is the World Championships for them. There's been a monumental crowd out watching the race here this afternoon. Tom Boonen on the right-hand side, Phil, has done a magnificent job, and if he can stay in contact with this group and they survive to the finish, there's not many men going to beat him. Now, this is looking a little bit further down the road. Armstrong over there on the left-hand side, I think, was in fact trying to come back. Hincapie in the middle.
Oh, it's very, the field is all getting back to George now. It looks as though it's not oaring well here. As the field is regrouping, the gap has opened to 33 seconds. That elastic is stretching to the point of snapping.
Once again, that's what it's all about. You hit them and you hit them again, and one day somebody sits up and says, I can't do this anymore, and the gap is gone, and the gap is starting to go up. It's 34 seconds for the Kop van de Wegstrijd. These 6 riders, 2 of the big pre-race favourites in this group, Peter Van Petegem on the far side there in the quick-stop jersey with the black shorts, and Tom Boonen on the left in the blue shorts and the light grey jersey of Quick-Step. This is a very interesting move now, and I think George Hincapie really should have tried to nail it over the summit of the Ten Bosch.
14 miles to go, 3 climbs to come. It is going to be the two climbs to come rather. It is going to be a very, very difficult finale now. I think the decision deep down, Paul, I'm beginning to think this is the decision.
This looks very much like the decision. It's nudging up 36 seconds, and you have to wonder who is going to organise the chase behind, because T-Mobile have got two riders in here. Quick Step have got one rider, the man they want in there, so they're not going to chase. And of course, so have De Mieterman Lotto with Peter van Petegem, one of the massive pre-race favourites, a man who's won this race on two previous occasions. Still
looking to equal the feats of Magny, Le Mans, Museu, if they can, three-time winners. And Buis, Archel Buis, four of them in all.
That gap is stretching out. Cars starting to come across here. That will be the neutral service vehicle coming across to move in behind the riders. But they are starting to get themselves organised there, Phil, on the front end of the group. That group has been seriously reduced, and if they can pull it back to the 15 or 20-second mark by the bottom of the Mur de Grammont, then maybe Hincapie has still got enough left in his legs to get across the gap. Eric Decker is there in the red, white and blue, not as dominant as I thought he was going to be this afternoon. And Armstrong, despite sitting up on the 10 boss, has ridden himself back into this group.
He's just come back in when they regrouped there moments ago.
It's pretty scary for the month of July. I tell you, most people were wondering through the winter season whether or not Armstrong was going to ride the Tour de France. It took him a long time to openly come out and said that he was. And now he's come here and said he wants to ride this race for George Hincapie. But, you know, if he'd wanted to and was in the right frame of mind, he could have ridden this race for himself.
And what none of us know the answer to is he riding these races for the last time? Because is he going to tell us later this month that he's ending his season and ending his career? We won't know the answer until mid-April, but certainly I wonder if he thinks to himself, this is the last time I'll see this race, and he wants a result. Well, looking down from the helicopter, these boys are the boys who've shaped now the Ronde van Vlaanderen. There it is, 3.5 kilometres to go to the Mur de Grammont, one of the most famous climbs in Flanders. Every cyclist who comes to this country always goes to have a look at the Mur, and everyone is amazed at just how tough a climb it really is.
Nasty climb, very difficult, even more difficult than it was a few years ago, because they've added around about 600 meters onto the top, because before they used to go straight over past the chapel, but now they turn right with just a little bit of a nasty kick at the top, just to really hammer home how hard this event is.
How nice. The Acht de Volgers, for the followers now, the second group, and again Discovery are having to take up the riding at the front. But I feel they're losing a tight grip on the reins now. 46 seconds, the gap is stretching.
Gap stretching, Armstrong on the front, and if they do pull this back, Armstrong is going to say to Hincapie, man, you better do the job, because we've done the job for you here this afternoon. That puts a lot of pressure on the shoulders of a rider. But you see, the reason that they're not able to organise the pacemaking on the front is there are a lot of riders in that group have got men in the leading group, so they're doing nothing at all to contribute to the pacemaking. Psychologically, that's like having an anchor on your back wheel.
Absolutely, they've got no help at all now. Slipping back here to the group, Tom Bonan, just for a drink. That's a neutral service car, hands out to everybody, so he didn't go back for a team talk, that's for sure. He looked to be suffering early on, but he seems to have recovered now. It was just a big effort into the red zone to get the breakaway prized open, but they've done that now. Chance to recover.
Chance to recover. Chance for the main field to pick up the pacemaking as well. 46 seconds. It's been edging further and further ahead for everybody in this group. Having a look back here, these riders here I think will be a little bit on the defensive. Just moving across there. This man here is Mark Lotz. He's been fairly active on the defensive role for Quick Step here. He'll be quite happy with the fact that he's got a man off the front end of the group.
Yes, that's what he's doing. He's just blocking, and there's another move there for Lotto just coming through as well.
And Lambau Credito got a man into that group also. Now moving across here, this is an interesting move. This is Stijn de Volder taking the pressure off George Hincapie, the winner just recently of the 3 days of La Panne. Did that by getting up there on the first stage, defending well throughout the 3 days, and then riding a very solid individual time trial towards the end, won by his teammate Yaroslav Ekimov.
Yeah, this group now is no longer organised here, and that is a bad sign. The gap will start to prise open, I think. These 6 riders, though, I have to say, don't seem to be racing as one unit either, and that's the reason they're not taking advantage of the tactics behind. They're all scared, of course, of the climb.
Everybody's scared of the Mur de Grammont.
And we do mean all of them, I think, because I don't think any of these riders are absolutely confident of the form right now. Zabel must be tired. Bonen we've seen visibly suffering. Van Petegem is shaking his legs as I speak. Clear might be the big surprise in this race. There's the top, by the way. That's the chapel on the top.
Could be the big surprise in this event. He's a man that started to ride back to form. He's coming up to 29 years of age. You know, he turned professional for Telecom some time ago, and I think probably the best win of his career was a couple of years ago when he took out Gent Wevelgem. But although
this is it.
Although Erik Zabel, Phil, has ridden so hard, this is the small bridge that takes the riders into Gerardsbergen. They drop down through the outskirts of town, and then they begin the climb up to the marketplace. And then there's a right-hand turn, and they're on the slopes of the Muur.
Then you get slapped in the face by this rather nasty-looking climb. We're now into the streets here of Gerardsbergen. Crowd are all coming out the coffee shops on what is a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Blue skies, spring-like temperatures. You can see by the shadows. Once we get to the end of what is normally a precinct here, pedestrianised, we'll turn sharp left. And these boys now, well, Balan has got no ambition. I think he's just happy to be here right now. He was the hero of the escape which formed this breakaway. But now I think if he could just take sixth place, he'd be absolutely over the moon. There's a real chance of that as we nudge out at the start of the climb. 51 seconds to the third group. There is those couple of riders in between, including Leon van Bon.
Peter van Petegem very happy to lead his way through Gerardsbergen here as they come right up to the start of the climb. They're not too far away now. Tom Bonen, Phil, knows that what he has to do in a situation like this is defend. He has to stay in contact, because if he can stay in contact to the finish, it's going to be a massive sprint between him and Erik Zabel. This is the left-hand turn. Starts to kick up.
We're about to leave the streets of Gerardsbergen, and there's only one way out of this town in the Tour de Flanders. You are up the steep climb of the Muur de Grammont. The same six riders still dictate affairs. Balan still sits at the back, but the driving forces are here. Despite the efforts of Lance Armstrong, the group behind has slipped away to 54 seconds. There's the profile. It's only just over half a mile or a kilometre in length, but boy, it's steep. It reduces grown professional cyclists to tears as they get towards the summit.
We haven't got to the steep part yet. We're going over the marketplace here, which is absolutely filled with people who've been watching most of this on a massive TV screen throughout the afternoon, waiting for these men to arrive. Another left-hand turn as they move away now from the marketplace, and then it's the right-hand turn that I think everybody in the sport of cycling knows. It's the right-hand turn that takes you onto the real nasty cobblestones of the final kilometre ascension up to the summit near the chapel.
Well, if only we could see the faces of those riders, where a camera's not allowed to go in front of the cyclists at this crucial stage. Look at the massive crowd here. They are holding it together right now and gaining 58 seconds at the moment, but no attacks coming at all. And I expected Van Petegem to have a go here just to test the strength of Tommy Bonen, but they're all staying together. And take your hats off to Balan. He has been on his own for so long. They've picked him up and he's still there, and he doesn't look like getting dropped.
Not yet, but Van Petegem, I think, will maybe just try and tickle the rest here once that road turns, sweeps round to the left-hand side, the steepest part of the Muur de Grammont, and that's where it doesn't matter what your body's like, you've got to use everything just to try and stay in contact with the road. That's the right-hand turn. That's when the serious cobbles start, and you really then have to change to the complete and utter end of your sprockets. It's gone over the 1 minute mark now at 16 kilometres to go to the finish, and it looks to me as if George Hincapie and Discovery Channel are not going to get the win here this afternoon, unless, of course, they do something absolutely magic.
Well, even on the last 12 kilometres, it's a long way to the finish, and it's not all downhill, but there's no climbs on the road. That would be their last chance, but I think it's gone now. We're looking at the strong men getting to the front, and the man who forced this and forced it all of the time until it happened was Erik Zabel, the grand old man of cycling. I think he's won 187 bike races as a pro. Van Petegem, I'm not sure whether anybody's got the strength to attack each other now. They're going to go to the finish possibly as a group, or they're saving one big effort on the Bosberg, which is the final climb of the day. Van Petegem climbing very, very well, though. He's got a good, clean style there. And gritting his teeth there is Zabel, and behind him, Clear looks as though he's in trouble. And look at Bonen gritting his teeth. This is a huge effort, in fact, now by Van Petegem. He made it look so easy, and Bonen has recognised it. Belgium have got themselves two heroes today.
Two heroes. Van Petegem not looked for any help from anybody there. I tell you what, Tom Bonen had to turn himself absolutely and utterly inside out to stay in contact. Eric Zabel showing his older years, but he's not out for the count just yet. He's still got a chance to recover over the top here. This is the right-hand turn that's been added in the last couple of years. Petito just a little bit off the back. You know, that was a great ride up there by Peter van Petegem. Now, this is a little bit further back at 58 seconds. There's Hincapie, but is it going to be just that little bit too late?
It's the last chance now. Big George trying to go, and the rider from CSC there was Vladimir Gusev from Russia. Another one of the new finds for Bjorn Ries's squad. Hincapie digging deep. He knows he's got to make everything count now. Catch this rider's win. In fact, he's going to take him on the climb and go for it. George might find himself chasing by himself in a moment. There's not much left to help him now. The moment of truth in the Tour of Flanders, when big men have been reduced to just club cyclists.
That's what it's all about. It's courage now. It's determination. This is the leading group of 4 riders. Kop van der Weegstraat, 15 kilometers to go. It's inside a minute, but it did appear from the front end of that group that Hincapie was going to try and ride across the gap himself. He has to throw caution to the wind. It's no good trying to save it now to sprint out for 5th or 6th place. If he wants to win this race, he's got to get across. And these riders here, Phil, are now moving up, swelling to 5 riders. Clear, I don't think will do very much, because he will wait to see whether or not Eric Zabel can come back, and Zabel is coming back.
The bold Eric Zabel will not give up here. He's attacked all day. He is entitled to feel tired, but he will not give up his chance of winning one race like the Tour of Flanders. He is fighting his way back, and with the Muur now behind them, the same 6 riders are together.
Just one climb to go, the Bosberg. In the old days, Edwig van Hooijdonk used to be known as the boss of the Bosberg, because that's where he laid his foundations to victory. As this group now reforms with 6 men at the front, I have to say, you're not supposed to take sides when you're commentating as a television commentator, but my fingers are crossed now for the man wearing number 8, Eric Zabel. What a victory it would be if he could get himself the win here, but I'm sure there's going to be another attack.
Well, Eric will try. He finished 4th in this event back in the year 2000. He is a rider who knows this course so well. Now there's only one climb between him and the finish. And still the sun comes down here. These 6 riders very rapidly regrouped, I have to say, and that's a good sign as they now move out to 55 seconds over the rest.
Ballan, he's the man who really started all of the aggression, and he really looked a fairly serious challenger for a long time, built himself up almost a minute's advantage. But then the cavalry came, and the cavalry came in the shape of Tom Boonen and Peter van Petegem. 2 riders in there for Telecom. In 2nd place is Andreas Clear. It's around about 1.5 kilometers now to the start of the Bosberg. It's not really a difficult climb, but when you've been in the saddle for 246 kilometers, it does hurt a bit.
It certainly does. Zabel has never been a man for the Tour of Flanders, even though he's been a man for the World Cup. He's world ranked number 1 last year. There's sadly no world rankings anymore now with the introduction of the Pro Tour, which frankly few people seem to understand, nor are they interested in at the moment, because the top 5 riders didn't even bother to turn up for this event. We'll have to say that the future of that so far is off to a shaky start. But Zabel here, although he's never had a love affair with this race, his best finish is 4th. He could be on for his first ever podium finish today.
Could be thinking in the back of his mind about a win, because I don't think they're going to rattle Eric Zabel on the slopes of the Bosberg. It's not quite as steep as the Muur de Grammont. Everybody now starting to move forward and help in the pacemaking. It's a pity we can't look back to see whether or not George Hincapie was able to steal an advantage over the front end of that group, because Hincapie, one day, Phil, I feel certain he must win one of these big one-day classics. He's been so close on a number of occasions.
Well, onto those concrete slabs, which is Belgium to anybody who cycles in this country. And 1 or 2 speed humps there as well, but not too steep. Ballan now, nobody I've noticed is turning around and saying, hey, come and give us a hand, because they've accepted now that that rider is desperately tired. He's doing well to hang on, and they'll let him sit there. They won't expect him to challenge either or attack, I'm sure of that. I suppose if we're looking at the big riders now, we're looking for the win from Boonen or Van Petegem. Surely they will handle everybody else in the sprint. But, you know, I think probably 1 or 2 are still going to try one last desperate lone attack for the finish.
It's such a scary event to leave down to the sprint, because it's a very difficult sprint to judge. It climbs up, and it seems to get steeper and steeper as you get closer to the finish. And Johan Museeuw knows all about that, because he thought he got himself the win a couple of years ago, and Gianni Bugno got the advantage in the photo finish. These guys looking over their shoulders, they're not confident that they've got this race sewn up, but they do need to keep working if they want to hold off the return of the main field, who are still hovering at the 1 minute mark.
Well, we're almost on the slopes of the Bosberg as we now enter the final phase of this year's Tour of Flanders.
They must be getting nervous. Van Petegem coming to the back of the group, and he must be worried about the presence of Tom Boonen, because Boonen has been such a fast finisher. 24 wins to his credit last year. Eric Zabel, look at Zabel going now.
This is an attack by Eric Zabel on the Bosberg. A final throw by a brilliant bike rider who's attacked all day. He's hurt his own teammate Clear. Clear's about to get back on. Petito's in trouble. But this now is the effort by Zabel, and it looks as though Boonen has latched on. The gap is still at 53 seconds here. But this is a final attempt by Eric Zabel.
Well, what a move here at the front. Peter Van Petegem responding directly there. Tom Boonen responding as well. Zabel at the back end of the group with Roberto Petito. The crowd here are going absolutely ballistic, but again, nobody's managed to get the gap. Now Boonen's going. Boonen is digging deep, and it looks as if Van Petegem was caught out in the wrong side, but he's tried to respond. He wants to come up to the wheel of the new 24-year-old champion of the Flemish people.
Well, Boonen, suffer he may be, but he's looking for that little ounce of extra pain, and he's got it. He's hurt two riders in the breakaway. Van Petegem, he just sticks onto this rider like a limpet. He is not going to let him go anywhere, and he's straight on his back wheel into his slipstream. Attack over as far as Tom Boonen and Van Petegem are concerned. A sigh of relief for Eric Zabel. But what about Ballan, who is riding superbly? Is that Clear that's got down there? Well, if it's Clear, he's come round from the back.
Andreas Clear has recovered there. He's moved
Beg your
himself
pardon,
up.
yes, it was Clear.
Ballan.
Yeah.
Ballan has also recovered pretty well. We're now looking at Clear, Van Petegem, Ballan and Tom Boonen. And if these guys don't keep the pressure on right now, Eric Zabel will come back.
Well, Clear shouting at Ballan now. Because listen, look at this now, because Petito is bringing Zabel back into play.
They haven't got rid of Eric Zabel.
Haven't got rid of anybody.
There's going to be a six-man group once again with 12 kilometers to go to the finish, and 50 seconds in arrears is what's probably the remnants of that very large group. And George Hincapie probably didn't manage to slip away from them. He looked very comfortable on the slopes of the Mur de Grammont, but that's not really a great thing to do when you're 50 seconds in arrears.
And as all top cyclists know, no matter how dead on his feet or on his wheels a sprinter appears, you never take a sprinter to the finishing line, because all of a sudden he finds his second lease of life.
But Tom Boonen, Phil, there is not riding like a sprinter. He wants to get away on his own if he can. And I wonder if there's an entente cordiale amongst the Belgians to make sure that it's a Belgian wins on this occasion, because they were pretty much slammed in the press last year when the two Belgian riders chased each other down and gave the win to Germany, and of course Stefan Weserman.
Yes, and Weserman laid to rest the ghost of Rudi Altig, who last won for Germany in 1964. 30 years on.
Petito moves Eric Zabel right on the wheel now. Zabel starting to recuperate just a fraction. Boonen is going after all of these moves there in third place. But it's starting to hurt now, every one of these accelerations. Just look at Ballan. He's riding as if he can right on the edge of the road there, just to try and get a little bit of help from the slipstream of the rider in front of him, Andreas Clear, who I would think will make a move now once this group comes back together.
Or even 40 years on. That's a bit of a ride there, Paul. 1964, Rudi Altig. He's still around, still watching the big time bike races, former world champion and a great winner of stage of the Tour de France. Well, it looks as though Clear has now got himself back into the ticket collector's position to check the assess everybody, see what their strength is like. Petito always surprises me, but hang on, he does. Ballan, well, we don't know anything about this rider. He's a new pro, and he's certainly on great form. Now, if the shadow boxing persists, of course, that will help the chasing group.
Certainly will. If they don't get themselves organised quite smartish, they could see the return of the main field in the final few kilometres. Peter Van Petegem still, he's like a poker player there. He just sits around and waits for the final sprint of the day now, and psychologically he must be feeling quite comfortable with a situation like this. Although I wonder if Tom Boonen has got anything left in that sprint of his, because he's been such an aggressive rider throughout the stage.
Very difficult to pick a winner, you know, right now. Boonen is a superb finisher normally. He's got the wins under his belt already this year. He won 24 races last year, but still he's seen reason to attack rather than wait for the finish, so he can't be feeling that confident. It's always a very difficult finish to judge. It's a steady uphill to the line. You come off a right-hand bend as well. Zabel knows it, and he was beaten. And Zabel was a big sprinter at the time when he finished 4th a few years back in this event. And he was beaten. He misjudged the finish completely. Went too early, and they all came over him.
Well, he must be thinking back to that time right now, and I wonder if he's wondering whether or not he can beat Tom Boonen. He beat Tom Boonen a couple of weeks ago, but that was for a lesser placing. But here right now, Van Petegem wants to try and get this gap if he can. He gets out of the saddle. Tom Boonen is all over his back wheel. And at the back there, it's Andreas Clear. Van Petegem, I think, wants to try and get this victory on his own if he can, because there's Tom Boonen now going over the top. What an unbelievable counter-attack that was, Phil.
Well, Boonen again. Now there's got to be a counter move, because this man is feeling rather frisky. And there's no counter move, and at 9 kilometers to go it comes. And I'm not sure whether that's Zabel who's made the move. I would think it probably is.
There's one of the riders from Telecom who've made the move, and it looks very much like the shape of Erik Zabel there, trying to nail them back. Right on his wheel is Peter Van Petegem, but don't be surprised to see a move come from Van Petegem if it all comes back together. Tom Boonen, renowned really to us as a sprinter, is riding here like a true champion of the one-day races. This
will take him another notch up the ladder of all-time greats. It's a bit early to say he's an all-time great of Belgium cycling. There's the counter-attack, had to come. As they start, yes, had to be, because he's not going to let Tom Boonen get the prize if he can stop him. And so it had to come, and it could be putting Belgium in the top 2 positions in the race. It's
going to be a battle. If Van Petegem can make the contact there with Tom Boonen, what a sprint that's going to be down to the finish. And the other 4 riders here now, Andreas Clear has seen the danger. He knows now that everybody else is a spent force in this group, and Erik Zabel is going to have to defend. Boonen looks over his shoulder, under his arms there, to see if he can see the shadow of the man who's won the Tour of Flanders on 2 occasions coming up to him, but he's still got the gap. He's still got himself around about 100 meters advantage. Phil, this is a great performance by a 24-year-old.
It's amazing what a mature bike rider he is, but you know, we've seen a counter-attack there too by Andreas Clear. And the last time Clear won a race of any note, it was Gent-Wevelgem, which is still to come later this week in 2003. On that occasion he beat the Australian Henk Vogels. And I remember Vogels congratulating him, and Clear said, you know, Henk, everybody needs a little bit of luck. Today I was lucky. Well, this man's leaving nothing to chance at all as Tom Boonen tries to push it home. 49 seconds to the 3rd group on the road. Well, I guess they mean the leader, this group, and then George Hincapie's group. But we don't, whatever's happened behind now, we're unaware of. But one thing's for sure, they're not going to catch up with the action here. This is the decisive move in Tour of Flanders today, and it happened when 6 riders got together just before the climb of Ten Bosch.
What a magical performance by this young man, Phil. 24 years of age, 24 wins to his credit last year. 5 wins so far this year, but they've all been in the sprint. I don't really remember any time when he's actually won a bike race on his own like this. He's got himself a good advantage. The 2 riders here from T-Mobile have to work to try and pull it all back together. And I have to say, Peter Van Petegem playing the perfect role as a Belgian here, because this is, after all, Belgium's monument. He's sitting back there hoping that the man at the front, Tom Boonen, gets caught, but he's actually not doing very much to contribute to chasing him down.
Well, he tried, but I think he couldn't reach him. And now his next tactic is to sit at the back and maybe try once more, or maybe just hope everybody else can do it. He's gone to the front now, but this is looking very desperate days for those riders chasing. There he is. They say it's 8 seconds. 8 seconds at this stage of the race with just 6 kilometers to go of 256. There's not a lot left in anybody's tank, and this rider may have hit them just right. He's looking so good.
He looks very good. He's got a strange style. It's not a fluid style. It's not a perfect style. He's not a great individual time trialist, but you don't have to be when you're in a situation like this, because you know your body has to scream out. This is a last do or die effort. He will have nothing left in his tank after a move like this, and all he hopes is to get to the final bend with around about 500 kilometers to go, 500 meters to go, I should say, with that small advantage.
We are now 5 kilometers from the end of the 256-kilometer 89th Tour of Flanders. Tom Boonen has made his move at 9 from the finish, and he's hanging on to 9 seconds. He's never won what used to be a World Club Classic. He's won Gent-Wevelgem. That comes up on Wednesday. He's finished third in Paris-Roubaix. But this will be without doubt the biggest win of his career, which has only started 3 years ago. And during that period, he's won 31 races. Now, is this going to be the icing on the cake at 24 years of age? And I think it might be.
I think it might be. It's still holding up just inside of the 10-second mark. You see Peter van Petegem tickling the front end of the group there. Zabel now starting to recuperate right onto the wheel of the Belgian, feeling comfortable. Petito claws his way back. Andreas Clear, I think, is a spent force.
Either spent or he's got a problem there. He's looking down his bike. One thing's for sure, he's off the back of this group now, leaving Zabel the sole representative for T-Mobile. And in the twilight seasons for Eric Zabel, he's never had a podium position in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. His best finish is 4th, and today he's got what will probably be his last chance.
4 kilometers to go. Look at that long drag. It's a long, straight, wide open road here. That group behind can see this man all of the time. He keeps getting down there into a fairly aerodynamic position. He bobs around a bit. He's an aggressive rider. He's just hoping he can survive, and the disadvantage he has here, Phil, is these 4 riders can see that gaggle of cars and motorbikes right behind him, and they can use him to try and judge their effort. But this man, his body is saying, please stop, please surrender, don't let yourself do this much damage to me. But he wants to win the Tour of Flanders. He's a Flemish bike rider, and this is his World Championships.
He's on a nasty little drag here. He's got to get over the top and keep going. Those wonderful massive legs, more like oak trees, as he stamps away. There's Van Petegem gone again on the left of the road. He was recuperating. He's still looking for the victory here. He's been a podium. Of course, he's won the race 3 times, as Peter, 2 times rather. As Peter, he's looking for a record equaling 3rd time. He hasn't got it. He's sat up. But watch out for Balan, Paul, because he's marking all the moves now, and I think this guy can sprint.
He's done pretty well now. There's a move by Petito going over the top there. Eric Zabel matches it, gets right onto the wheel. But this is actually looking good for the man off the front end of the race, Tom Boonen, because what happens is they accelerate to 45, 47 kilometers an hour, then they slow down. All of the time he's riding at a steady tempo. You can just see the cars in front. I have a feeling it's actually a little bit less than the 10 or 12 second mark, as Petito has got it halfway across the gap.
Well, Petito's only won 1 race in the last 4 years, and it was a stage in Tirreno Adriatico back last year, in fact, in March a year ago. And now he's trying to reach the leader of the Tour of Flanders, and there he is, Tom Boonen. We're getting a little bit of picture breakup. We're sorry about that. These pictures coming live, of course, and bouncing back into the homes from the helicopter. But this rider's probably sending out a little bit of static himself right now as he tries to stay clear for the finish. At this stage of the race, 3 kilometers from home, he either wins or he finishes 6th.
That's the only thing that he's thinking about. But, you know, the cars are just in front of him there, and it looks as if they're slowly but surely clawing back. It's 11 seconds, the official time gap to Tom Boonen. He doesn't look like a man who's weakening at all. In fact, that's 2 kilometers to go for Boonen. 11 seconds. It's still not done. It's still not in the bag, but he doesn't show any signs at all of weakening. And this is good. They've actually slowed down a fraction in this group behind. But you know what? It's still only 12 seconds. 2 kilometers to go. 3 minutes he needs to wait to know his answer.
Watch the clock. It'll nudge the 13 any moment now, because I think that little bit of relaxation by the group here, they're getting to that psychological part of the day now when they suddenly think, well, the wind's gone, I want 2nd. And now they start to fight each other, and that's when the gap will open into a comfortable margin for Tom.
The next sign that he is going to see is going to be the Flamme Rouge, the kite across the road, which will tell him he's got 1 final kilometer to go. And I think it appears once he takes this right-hand bend, there's a big archway right in front of him, and with 10 seconds to go, I don't think anybody right now is going to catch this man, Tom Boonen. There's the kilometer flag, 1,000 yards.
And the 2nd added. We're up to 13. That should be enough. That is going to be a record-breaking kilometer for the chase group if they're going to reach him. They're not going to do that now. Tom Boonen takes 1 step further forward in the eyes of the Belgian people. They're still looking for a man to replace Eddy Merckx as their finest ever cyclist. It's a long way for Tom to do that, but he's already now going to go down as a great classics rider. This will be his first monument classic victory, and it couldn't come any better in his own race, the Tour of Flanders. There's the shadow boxing now. The wind's gone for them.
This is the right-hand turn now. This is around about 500 meters to go. The race is won here for Tom Boonen, 3rd in Paris-Roubaix, but this is going to be monumental for him. He said he wasn't too worried about Milano Sanremo. All he wanted to do was try and win this race and he's inside 400 yards away from the win.
And from where we are sat, I can tell you the crowd in the grandstand are already cheering here, and they're craning their necks forward to catch a glimpse of 24-year-old Tom Bonan. He won 24 races last year. He gave them all away to win this one. He can't believe it's today, that it's his big day in the world of cycling in his own country. He comes home as winner of the 89th Tour of Flanders, and that means Tom Bonan now has arrived in the real big time of Belgian cycling. Just look at that. There's a big message in that powerful victory salute. There's the phalanx of photographers there. As Bonan comes home, he's won Game Wevelgem. That was a great moment, but now he has won La Ronde.
He's certainly done that. That was a great time. You know, this man could have won the race in the sprint if he'd wanted to, Phil, but he wanted to do it in emphatic style. He went away and knew that it was so risky to try and get himself the win, and it looks here as if that's Andreas Clear, and he may well have caught the riders off guard and come up to take second place.
Well, we never saw the attack, but T-Mobile won it last year. They've made recompense with a second place this year by Andreas Clear. That's a great result for him, but they would have preferred the win, I am sure. And Van Petegem just gets the podium place, I think, and Petito, Zabel and Ballon taking 6th of the 6 places, which was a great result for him. But I think the 3rd and 4th places probably slipped over to the camera.
Well, that was quite a remarkable performance there, Phil, by Tom Bonan. A risky thing to do when you've got a great sprint at the end of a race like that, but he wanted to do this in great style. He's done it. If he'd been caught, he would have finished last from that group, but that's something he probably never even thought about over the last 9 kilometers of this event.
And here is the group stars. They can continue to come in. 6 hours, 22 minutes. They've been out there in the sun today, and it really has been very warm. George Hincapie here in the sprint, trying to salvage something here from the race today. We've had 6 riders finish. This will be the race for 7th. Hincapie trying to break through and take it. He looks though he'll think he might get this, as Hincapie's still strong. He'll have to hang on as he comes up towards the line, but Hincapie crossed the line. I think he's in 7th place as he brings home the race. He just pips Leon Van Bon on the line there. There's the result confirmed. Bonan, Clear, Van Petegem, Zabel, Petito, Ballon had a great ride. Hincapie confirmed in 7th place, where he pipped Leon Van Bon in the sprint, and even off from T-Mobile just behind. So to enormous cheers from his Belgian fans here, Bonan steps up into the #1 position. Alongside him, another great man of La Ronde, Peter Van Petegem. He's won it twice before. Now he's on the podium again. And that's a great result for him. And Andreas Clear there taking the 2nd place, which is also a good result for him. And poor old Eric Zabel just missing out yet again in what likely is his final Tour of Flanders. But there's the man who has delighted the home crowd. Belgium have waited a long time to get a true champion. They've had Johan Museeuw. Eddy Merckx set the bar too high for everybody. This rider, though, everybody feels has an incredible future. 24.5 years of age. He's just got his 32nd pro win. He'll need a special truck, I think, to take home that trophy.
Tactically, you rode a very good race there, but you just seemed to miss out at a couple of points where Van Petegem and Tom Bonan got away.
Yeah, for the tactic for me today was to wait till the Muir, so I did that. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Those guys went, and when they go, you know, I should have been there, but I was too far back, 20 guys back, and I missed the move of the day, where typically it would go on the Muir. Good thing is, though, that I don't feel sick anymore, and I think I'm coming back to my level, and hopefully these next 2 races I will be able to do a good result.
The reason you rode tactically like that and waited for the Muur de Grammont, is that because you felt that you were recovering from this illness?
Well, no, that's because of the team. We had more guys there at the end this year, and they were able to go with the moves, with the attacks in between the climbs, so I was able to sit back, and maybe it was not such a good thing, because I sat back a little too far back, you know, 20, 30 guys back, thinking that that was enough, and when the Muir came, I could make a move up and try to go with the selection, but unfortunately it went before that, and there wasn't much I can do. I tried to react a couple times, but it was too late.
The team was very good today. You can't say you didn't have enough teammates up alongside you. If the team is the same next week, do you feel confident for Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah, like I said, I'm happy. Last week I I did a race in Belgium, and you know, I finished 6th place, but I had nothing. I was so bad, and I was just coming back from the flu, and really just suffered a lot last week. And this week I can feel my legs were almost back to normal, and the team looked really strong. And you know, I think this is the best team ever in the classics, and if we have some good luck, we can do a lot of damage in Roubaix.
Talking about back to normal, everybody wondered about Lance Armstrong in Paris-Nice. I think today he answered a few questions.
Yeah, Lance looked super comfortable all day, and he was tired in the bus, but who wouldn't be tired after a day like today? It was really epic, but I think Lance is on track for the tour, definitely.
Great, thanks, George.
Okay, thanks.
Good luck. It'll be good next week.
Good job, George.
Well, Johan, I think a few people asked themselves questions about Lance after Paris-Nice, but I think he answered a lot of questions today.
Well, I think he showed today that he's improved a lot, that he's in pretty good shape. Definitely not good enough to be with the strong guys of Tour of Flanders, but I think that's not a surprise. I have to say that's the good thing of today, that Lance has shown that he's on track, he's motivated, he wants to race, he likes to race. The disappointment of the day is that we had some bigger expectations of the race. We had a strong team with George, with Ekimov, with De Volder, Hosta. Yeah, at the moment, I think the team rode a very smart race. They were always hiding and reserving, and we thought it was going to happen on the Muur of Heeresbergen, and finally it happened on the Valkenburg, but it's definitely not an excuse. When Bonen, Van Petegem, Klier, Zabel, if they go, you have to be there, you know. So yeah, that's a bit of a disappointment.
Tactically, it was a strange race, though, because actually none of the major decisions were made on the climbs. They were all made in between the climbs.
Yes, but the decision of Bonen in the beginning with Klier and with Van Petegem on the Valkenburg was uphill. So there, definitely, if you have the legs, you have to try to be there. And we have tried, and we couldn't. So we just have to accept that some guys were stronger today. I think as a team we rode perfect. We tried to react when we had to react. We couldn't close the gap. So once we saw that it was 30, 35, 40 seconds, we said, okay, nobody's helping here. We're just gonna ride for 7th place, and that's what happened. But good points, not so good points. I won't say bad points because
Hincapie and De Volder now have to think forward to a week, because Hincapie has always been good at Paris-Roubaix, but he has to get some animal instinct.
Yeah, well, I think George has been riding a very smart race today, and he's strong. And I think he's just coming back from an illness, which he couldn't start Milan-San Remo because he had the flu. So he's improving, and I think in 1 week he's going to be stronger than today. Hopefully the team can stay on the same level. So let's hope that next Sunday we are a little happier after the finish.
Roger, pretty tough day, but it was nice to see that Discovery Channel had a lot of riders up towards the end.
Yeah. I mean, actually, until Valkenburg, we had 7 guys in the front group, which was looking really good for us actually until that point. I just went back and tried to get some bid-ons just before the climb, which probably wasn't, in hindsight, the best thing, but never mind. I went back, got bid-ons, but then the attack went on that climb, and then by the time I got back on, the group was in split in 3, and then it was race over for me there. So
first time you've actually ridden in the same team with Lance Armstrong. How was it?
Yeah, it was good. He's he's, like I said before the race, he's a born leader, and it doesn't mean that he's bossy. It just means he knows what he's doing, and he knows what he's talking about, and he doesn't have over expectations of anybody. But the good and the bad, he's very complimentary if you do your job right, and if you don't, he tells you to get to the front and get on with it. Nice
to see him riding well today.
Yeah, it is really good. I mean, he looks lean. He's looked lean ever since I first saw him in Texas, actually, in December. But I'm really chuffed for him that he's coming on so quickly. I mean, it must be good for his morale. And I think he got some critique for what he did in Paris-Nice. So, I mean, if you can turn that around that quickly, then it shows you got real class.
Talking to your team manager, he said there's a positive and a negative to take out of the Tour of Flanders. Positive because Armstrong rode well, but negative because George Hincapie missed a very vital move.
Yeah, he did miss a move, but this race is really, really complicated, and like I always said, is that you need to have superb legs, be 100% in good condition, and then have just that little bit of luck. And you know, we were always talking about the Muur and talking about how difficult the Muur was, and you know, I just wonder whether George had a lot of the Muur on his mind, and you know, the climb before is always a little bit of a, you know, you think it's going to be the lull before the storm. So, actually the climb that it went on, I mean, if you rode up it in training, you probably wouldn't really even notice it. So it's just like one of those things that, you know, you can't blame him for missing it because you can't mark everything. So.
But next week is a different race. Last year you were third in Paris-Roubaix. Will you be given protected status, or will it be George and De Walde?
Well, I think we'll see on the day. I mean, I'm hoping that I'll be given a little bit more of a free roll than I was given here, and you know, Roubaix is my kind of race, and I like it, and you know, I'm a lot more motivated for it than I am for Tour of Flanders. So we'll see. But I mean, if they say that they want me to ride for George, then so be it. It's we'll see on the day.
Okay, we'll see. Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Well, what a great race it was, and of course a wonderful victory, especially if you're Belgian. The crowd going home very happy this evening because they've not just found a good winner of the Tour of Flanders, I think they've found themselves a long-term super champion.